This is the Carlisle Board of Selectmen's meeting. I'll read through the agenda, and we're going to try to stay on point and on time as much as possible, but some of these things may be taken out of order if, for some strange reason, we actually get ahead of ourselves. So 7 o'clock is community input. 7:05 is going to be the discussion with the Facilities Committee and FinCom. I think Tom's here. 7:45 is the Deer Committee. We're going to have a general discussion on deer hunting regulations. 8:15 will be discussion of Center Park management options. 8:30 will be the discussion of PEG local access options, CCTV, Town of Concord, or the Carlisle option, or the Claude option, I should say. 9 o'clock is Town Moderator, so Wayne, I guess, will be here. That'll be good.
Yes.
Oh, good. 9:30 will be appointments. 9:35 will be Tim's Town Administrator's report. 9:45 will be our Board of Selectmen Liaison Reports. 9:55 will be minutes. And 10 o'clock will adjourn. So, community input. I know you're here for some, Bob. Yep. That's yeah. Oh, geez. Oh, boy. Setting a new precedent. Yeah. Oh, boy. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
Take the hint.
there's the handout. I'm Bob Zog, 923 North Road. I wanted to bring up a subject today on our community choice power supply program that we've been working with 20 Power. It seems like things are in order for possible launch in the next couple of months, depending on price signals and whatnot, based on what I know. But a seemingly small detail in how this gets rolled out will have impacts on energy costs and greenhouse gas emissions for Carlisle residents. Now the plan is, it's been put together, will have multiple options. There'll be a low-cost option, and there will be a one or more options that have increasing amounts of renewable energy, up to 100% renewable energy. And one of those options will need to be the default, what people will get if they don't take any other action to change. It turns out the option you specify as default really does matter, even though people hypothetically can change. Data based on communities across Massachusetts that have launched these programs see almost no change from the default option. So most people just go with whatever the default is. So if one were to look at the cost implications, now of course we don't know the cost implications yet, but just as an example, Lincoln launched their program last year. They actually went with the default of 100% renewable, and their low-cost option was just over 1/10 of a cent per kilowatt hour less than that. Now, we don't know if we'll get that kind of a differential here or not, but if we got that differential, the cost impact would be about $15 per household per year. Or for the low income people, there's 23 households that currently have Eversource low-income service. They would pay about $12 more for that type of premium, $12 less for the low cost, if you want to look at it that way. So that would be a total of about $24,000 in savings going with a low-cost option versus the 100% renewable. That was Lincoln's number. Excuse me, that was Lexington's number. Now, in terms of the impact on greenhouse gas emissions, the difference between 100% renewable and the default low-cost option would be about 7,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions per year.
For the entire town?
That's for the entire town.
Of Carlisle?
That's for all the people, that's for Carlisle businesses and residents that are currently under basic service with Eversource. About 7,000 tons of carbon would be the difference. That translates to about 1,400 automobiles. To put it in another perspective, it translates to the impacts of about 100 heat smart clean heating and cooling programs should we meet our goals under heat smart. So the recommendation is that we get more community input on this detail. It's true that the overall aggregation plan and community choice program have been vetted But I don't think this particular detail, which default option is put forth, has been vetted, and I certainly don't think the implications of that default have been vetted by the community. And I'd really suggest that you get input on that before making any commitments to a default option.
All right,
I'm
great.
happy to discuss at another time if you'd like to talk more about it.
All right,
Yeah.
great. Thanks, Bob.
A bunch of quick ones.
Yeah, we'll probably, I mean, once we get
Like-
closer to this point,
Yeah.
then we'll probably put it on the agenda and invite Bob. And I mean, we'll obviously have the guy back from Community Choice Power, right? Is that what is it?
Yeah,
I
Colonial.
forget what- Or Colonial.
Power
that's-
Group.
Yeah,
Mark
Colonial Power.
Capadonna was here.
Yeah, that's his name,
Yes,
Mark,
and he
yeah.
was recommending for us
He's
not to
recommending we
change.
not
Right.
go forward because
Yeah.
the market wasn't favorable.
Capadonna.
I've talked with him recently, and things are changing, and they actually do recommend we at least go out and get some pricing.
Yep.
In this cycle. He's willing to come out and talk, again with the board and with the Energy Task Force in the next few weeks, so we can set that up.
All right, yeah.
See what the options are.
All right, yeah, no, that sounds good. After town meeting.
Yes.
In somebody else's chair.
Yeah, because we got so many things,
You know.
other things that we have.
All right, facilities. Yeah. Uh-oh. Yeah. Are you here for community input, or no? Are you here for a specific thing? Are you here for community input?
municipal facility.
Oh, okay, oh, good,
Okay.
okay.
Good.
All right.
That's what we have
Jen, do
next.
Just wanted to make sure you weren't here for community input and we blew by you before.
Rick Amodei just stepped in, that's who we're talking to. Kim didn't say anything.
How's everybody doing? All right, so I guess we had received an email. Did everybody see that email from Scott
Yeah.
regarding
Yes.
FinCom? Okay. So we had received an email from FinCom. They had some concerns about the way the process was going to work for the Facilities Committee. I think they also had some concerns about the facilities manager position, right? And exactly who that was going to report to and all of that. So some things have gone out. Tim put together this memo. And I also, I want to make sure that we're on the same page as FinCom. Facilities, yeah.
So Scott's memo wasn't in this packet? It was just in the electronic one?
Yeah,
Oh,
maybe.
yes, yeah.
But basically, I want to make sure that everybody's on the same page heading into town meeting. And the sooner we get it on the agenda, we can talk about it tonight, try to figure out, if there are any still lingering questions, and then we'll still have the meeting before town meeting, 24th, to hash out any final details. So, do you want to give a brief overview, Tom?
Again,
Do
or
you-
maybe Tom can
Yeah.
summarize the FinCom's concerns and then what led to
All right,
some of
yeah.
this together.
Well, basically, we had, I guess, maybe a few, I'll call them general concerns, or a whole list of things that probably put into maybe three categories. One was what I'll call the facilities manager. Those specifically would be duties, spending authority, reporting relationship, et cetera. And the second group would be oversight and review, things like reports and meetings and so forth. And third would be conflicts and inconsistencies. And in meetings with Tim, and then just the other day, Tim, myself, met with a couple guys from facilities, Jerry and Bill, and Steve came in later on. I think we probably got to, I'd say, 95% resolution
Oh, good.
of those issues. And Tim can address some of the specifics, and he has in the things he put out. We've got a couple of what I'll call minor concerns I think we can hash out or table until we get into the actual workings of the whole thing. But generally speaking, our concern was we were launching into a new program with a lot of money to spend, and we were uncomfortable that some of the controls were not present. We think with what Tim has done, has really kind of put those controls in place in the largest part. A few minor things, like I said, I think we can hash out. Details we can go through, I guess, Tim, with your memos.
Sure. Don't have a copy of it handy, but
You don't have it memorized?
So what is another
I
one?
think that
Do you need one?
printed mine out.
Well, to sum it up, I think kind of
There's one in the binder.
succinctly, in the proposed job description for the facilities manager, which is before the personnel board tonight, to me, the key line is that the position works under the general supervision of the facilities committee, but under the day-to-day reporting and control of the town administrator. And I think, and in talking with the members of the facilities committee, that's how they envision it too. That they're the ones that are gonna set, policy and priorities and review progress on reports, but they very much don't wanna be standing in the way of progress. That this, facilities manager is gonna have a lot on his or her plate, and they're gonna need to, move forward and get through the procurement process on projects and get things done. And if this person had to wait, for a facilities committee meeting later in the month before they could do anything, it wouldn't be very practical. And frankly, that's how most of our independent boards and committees work currently. RecCom's a good example. They had a bid for Anna Davis Field Rehab. They developed the specs, and they told me what they wanted. We put the bid package together and did the procurement for them, and, executed the contract. And, the finance department, Priscilla verifies that there are funds behind the contract before anyone signs anything.
It's always a good thing.
So the process works, that way in Carlisle. So I guess in my memo, I very much wanted things to follow the process that we use. We have a procurement policy that mirrors the state's procurement statutes. So I think the closer we stay to that, probably, the better off we'll be. And the facilities committee certainly should, review bids when they come in and recommend a contractor or vendor to this board on occasion. But, as the chief executive, you should be signing off on, the large-scale contracts and things with the concurrence of the facilities committee. So I think that, it's new to us. We didn't think too much about the process. We knew we wanted to get the position in the budget, and now we got to think about how it's going to work. But I think, everyone has the best of intentions, and I think, if it works like, 98% of everything else works here, it will be fine, because we've got a very good finance department and, good oversight, good procurement policies. And I think part of the issue, frankly, I think the charge to the committee was a little vague, a little ambiguous, so we've taken a shot at cleaning that up a little bit. There was reference to school properties there that we explicitly deleted from there. I think for now, this person's gonna be working on town facilities. We don't know what it's gonna look like down the road, but the charge was written a little bit like a charge to a school building committee, and it was reference to Chapter 71 and, some of the school statutes. So we wanted to kind of clean that up, take that out, and write it as if it, it's a facilities manager for town facilities at this point in time. And the committee is, again, they're, primarily advisory in nature. There's a lot of experience on that committee, and the facilities manager, is going to be working very closely with that committee, on the, priorities and setting up a program of projects, if you will, from what, emerges from town meeting. But for the day-to-day, the reporting and kind of the nuts and bolts of procurement and contracts and finance, we see it, flowing through the normal process that we use for most other committees here. I know Priscilla's here tonight, probably to reiterate the finance piece, but, and Tom and I did meet with Bill and Jerry and Steve Hinton, and we talked about some of this, and I think we were, we found that we agreed on most of the major points. I don't know if Bill or Jerry have anything to add to that.
Well, we're doing something new that we've never done before. I think we put together a good framework for making something work. I would expect that after we have a year or two experience, we might want to change some things to make things work better. But I think we have a good framework.
See, Our concern was mainly that a lot of these good intentions weren't codified.
Yeah.
They weren't written
Very
down. We
important.
wanted to make sure that the i's are dotted, t's are crossed, positive control over a budget of $400,000.
Right, yep.
And, but you're okay now with Tim's memo for the process and everything and the job description?
Yeah, I sent Tim some comments on his latest memo, a
It
couple
still needs
tweaks,
some work,
a couple
yeah.
tweaks, but yes, at 95%, I think we're there.
Okay.
You're good.
Yeah, I thought this was a great proposal. Thanks.
Yeah, we'll work it out between now and town meeting or
Yeah.
shortly thereafter.
I just had a question about the committee charge, the revised committee charge, and that we're gonna do it for annual terms. I'm wondering if we don't want slightly longer terms for institutional memory, for one thing, and for second thing, not to have such high turnover every year. I mean, possibly you could turn over the entire committee
Yeah,
if
right.
we have annual terms.
Right.
So I was thinking, could we consider
Staggered terms?
Yeah, staggered.
some sort of, at least 2-year terms, if not 3. so-
7-year?
Yeah, right. Well,
It's lifetime
actually,
for
7
Bill.
years is not, 5 years, I mean, anyway.
Yeah, no, that
Um,
makes a lot of sense, yeah.
And then the only other question I had in reading it was, in support of the major construction projects, $150,000 or greater, the Board of Selectmen shall appoint the department head and/or 2 committee members for which a project is being planned or constructed as non-voting ex officio members of the Municipal Facilities Committee for the duration of said project. And I had no idea which committee members we're talking about. Because if you're adding 2 new committee members to the Municipal Facilities Committee, it's not those committee members.
This is referring to, it's either the department head or committee members like that.
Mm.
Okay, so it was
Yeah.
confusing, because I was thinking, what, which committee? What-
Yeah,
what
so
we're
maybe just
talking
some,
about
yeah,
here. So,
clarification on that.
I think we need a little clarification on that.
So was it the facilities committee you're talking about now, or was it?
This
It
is
was,
the-
so
yeah,
yeah, I know.
imagine when this was, when it still included the school, this was a way of making sure that the school committee or like the library trustees or something would have input in a major project.
Yeah. Or if you were doing a new police station, you might want the police chief. to
Right,
be-
Yeah,
the police chief
but
might
there's no-
want to be.
But there's no committee involved in that, so then,
So basically, it's the affected department.
Yeah.
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, we can take another look at that.
okay, it's just that it was confusing.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah, because then will we have to accept the charge again as a board?
If we're gonna revise it, maybe we should wait and see if there are any more changes in
Yeah.
the next
Yeah.
few weeks or something,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Just a typo I pointed out. Take out
Oh,
the
yeah,
word
sorry,
"and."
yeah, Tom found the typo as well.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah,
Typo
so,
and- There's two commas too.
yeah, so if folks want to, just go through this and maybe forward your,
Okay,
comments to Tim, and then he can include them and we can vote on it at the next meeting. And then ultimately, have you guys met, has FinCom met to discuss? No, probably
No,
not.
we have
since-
not.
Okay, yeah, so but you guys will probably have a meeting before the 24th, right? Just to-
23rd.
On the 23rd, yes.
Oh, perfect,
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah. Unfortunately, I'm missing- We're supposed to meet together on the 23rd, no?
Are we? Is it a joint meeting on the
It's their
23rd?
budget hearing, so sometimes.
yeah,
Oh,
we-
oh,
just
okay.
go,
Yeah.
but
Good. I'm not missing,
not for the general
I'm missing your
public.
budget hearing,
Right.
sorry. Looked
But,
like you found that.
Yeah, no, just, I mean, I'm assuming, you'll get it back to the board, or the committee, FinCom, and, ultimately if there's any.
Yeah, we want to see this actually stamped before we say yes or no on our recommendation.
Oh, I gotcha. Oh,
It has to be real.
right. Yeah,
We like the changes, but they have to be official.
yeah, so I mean, ultimately then, well, until it's finalized, we can give you the general.
Well, it's not the
Sensible.
committee charge that you're worried about.
Oh, it is.
Oh, it
Yeah, it
is.
is.
Oh, it
Yeah, yeah,
is.
yeah.
Oh,
Right.
I'm sorry, it is that.
Yeah.
I mean, this new chart, revised
new
chart,
chart,
Yeah.
helps
okay.
to fix some of the problems
Oh,
we've.
so we
Right.
really need to kind of decide this.
Yeah,
Tonight.
Well, they
We
could
don't have
still
another meeting
take a
before-
Or
position at
before,
town meeting.
before the 20th, we're meeting on 23rd.
right,
One of our objectives is to decide on our position relative to the warrant.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, because our next meeting is the 24th, though,
Yes.
so if, I mean, ultimately, if folks are okay with the general idea, or the, basically as written with, the suggested changes, We could,
Yeah, I
we
mean,
could take a vote on it tonight.
I'm happy to say that, to propose a motion.
Please do.
Uh,
Usually when I stare like that, that means it.
I move that the Board of Selectmen approve the memorandum and attached documents, including the job description for the facilities manager and the Carlisle Municipal Facilities Committee, as presented tonight and dated April 6, 2018, allowing for minor edits.
Good.
If you
Is
want.
there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any further discussion?
The only thing, do you need us to specify what sort of edits, like terms or,
Well,
the
if you-
committee terms?
The
or-
ones you just mentioned are
Yeah,
fine.
so it's
You
gonna be,
Consider those minor, that's.
Yes, yeah.
okay.
yeah, so
I
it'll be
wanted-
just some minor clarification and then the
clarify.
terms, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the general,
For minor, minor to me means that there's nothing substantial
You're
that's
right.
going to change the gist of what we're trying to do
Right,
here.
no.
Okay,
exactly, yeah. Yep.
then I stand by my second.
All right, so, I guess everybody, is that it? Okay, Oscar Lilo, aye.
Reed, aye? Sorry.
You're
Sorry,
muted, Carrie. You're muted.
You're muted. Now you have to
We
unmute.
can't hear you.
Am
There
I
you go.
okay now?
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Kissinger, aye.
Brown eye?
I don't know if Priscilla had anything to add.
Oh, did you have anything?
to-
Sorry.
I'm glad you were talking about controls, because I felt like both the Green Eyes and the Warrant book had none,
Yeah.
and I was a little nervous about that,
Mhm.
sitting in my seat. And, but I also thought it had the school, I thought school had some of the listing,
All the projects?
some of the projects, so.
I don't think so.
No, I,
Yeah.
isn't
There's
there?
no school.
No.
There's something in the long-term caps for
Right.
school, but there's nothing in the
Nothing in that,
facilities.
okay.
Yeah.
That's right, isn't it?
Excuse me, who is speaking?
Oh, Priscilla.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so I feel like it's a little tighter, it's,
Yep.
I couldn't see how it was gonna work. It makes me nervous.
No, it's understandable, yeah. So, all right, great. Wow, look at that, ahead of schedule. Do you guys have anything else you want to add while you're here? You got a few minutes, open mic night.
And thank you for bringing your concerns, and thank you guys for working
Yeah.
through them, and Tim,
Yeah, thanks for,
really want this to work, and
yeah, thanks for meeting on that Friday.
Now you hire somebody.
Hmm?
You gotta hire a facilities manager.
yes,
Yes.
I'd
they
rather-
get it posted.
Right, exactly. Great.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thanks for taking time out of your Tuesday now. Monday, Tuesday, Friday.
Lawsuit.
All right, so 7:45, so we got the deer. Do we want to wait? We should probably wait, just in case anybody shows up
Yeah.
for that, because we had people the last time.
She wanted to come in.
Lee? Okay. Yeah, so we'll wait. 8:15 Center Park. Is that Sabrina?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's Sabrina, but I
All
don't
right.
think we should start it yet.
No, so we'll hold off on that one as well. You want to go to
We
the?
can do appointments.
Yeah, the appointments? Yeah,
Well,
we'll hold off on PAAC.
Is that,
Okay.
is that a-
You want to do
The
PAAC?
appointment actually might benefit from the discussion on the local access.
Oh, okay.
It sort of
All right, so do-
presupposes going one direction
All
rather
right.
than another. so-
Okay, so why don't we do
How
the
far ahead are
8:30
we?
then? We can do the PEG access.
Do we-
People closing the door on us already? Yes? PEG access, PEG
Yeah.
access? PEG access, you can get out a little earlier? All right, so we're gonna bump to number 5.
We're not expecting anybody else, right?
No, I don't think so. No. All right, so we need to get this back on the agenda because there's been some discussion in Concord as to exactly what they're gonna do. But also, I think, don't we need to figure out how we're gonna spend that money?
Yeah.
So, so I guess there were 3 options. You know, one was to stay with CCTV, one was to buy in with Concord. And then the third was Claude's Carlisle option. And I guess, so we haven't really had an update. I mean, Kerry sent a couple of emails, he's forwarded a couple of emails, but we haven't really had an update in a while. Kerry, do you want to give the update, or Tim, do you?
Actually, I might ask if you're all right with it, Carlin Reeves from
Okay.
Concord, she's involved
Yeah, that'd be great.
with their proposed PAAC Access Advisory Board,
Okay, what do I say?
and she can kind of
Anywhere
fill
In front
you
of a
in
mic.
Front of a mic.
Yeah, so-
Great, okay.
on the discussion in Concord, which I think has been shifting back toward a kind of a let's give
Chair inside.
CCTV another shot at this before.
Oh, you got the
Sorry about
sinking
that.
chair?
Oh, it's
Yeah.
incredible.
It's gonna
Yeah,
go
that's
back
better.
there.
Yeah.
That's better.
Yeah, one of them sinks, yeah.
So if you could summarize for the board, maybe what's
Yeah, that'd be
happened
great.
over the past couple of months since we
Oh, my
saw
gosh.
Chris Whalen and Kate Hodges two or 3 months ago. They were pushing the IMA with Concord pretty
Right.
heavily at that point, but a number of things have changed since then. So maybe, if you could update us.
I'll give you a 2-minute spiel and then offer to you to answer any questions. My name's Carlin Reed, and I'm one of the people that's been recently appointed to the new PAAC Access Advisory Committee in Concord. There are 3 people who've been appointed, myself, Peggy Wargelin, and Scott Hopkinson. There are 7 seats total, plus 1 ex officio Carlisle member, and I'm changing chairs because that's ridiculous.
Yeah, that one, yeah, I know.
I'm getting short about the minute.
Can we just throw that one out?
Yeah.
It's funny, because it works its way back here, and then
Yeah, I know.
it works its way around, and-
These-
yeah.
It's the dreaded chair.
Mm.
Yeah. So a little while ago, I met with Tim and with one of your residents, Christine Lear, about looking for someone to serve as the ex officio member. Now, I don't know what the status is of your negotiations with the town of Concord regarding their intermunicipal agreement. I'm not involved in that process. But the last time I saw the charge, the contract, there wasn't a provision in it for a voting member for Carlisle, which, in my personal opinion, I'd say is a shame, because if you choose to go with Concord, you'd be contributing a substantial chunk of money. And I personally think you should have a seat at the table, a voting member, not just an ex officio. But again, that's up to you on what you choose to do. Okay.
I just want to ask just one quick question.
Fire
We don't
away.
actually have a signed contract with Concord, do we? Our contract is with
CCTV.
CCTV.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's
Right.
long
Okay.
expired. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's in overtime, yeah.
I actually had a question about that. Are you on a month-to-month basis now, or how does that work?
Just that the terms prevail until a new agreement is reached, basically.
Yeah, we signed a new
The
agreement that just said
yeah.
it's going to keep going under the old terms until we come up with a new agreement.
That's the one of the contract that I haven't seen, so if it's possible, I'd like to see a copy of what was in effect at some point, if it's
You mean
public
the original-
information.
the original-
Whatever's you're going under at this point. I've seen all the other contracts and the franchise agreements. I've looked at what's going on in Carlisle as well as Concord. You had asked for a quick update. The quickest thing, last night at town meeting for Concord, there was an article for discussion, and it was the only hotly contested issue. It lasted for 40 minutes, and it was Article 20. It's called the Freedom of the Press article. You can see what it is on the website. It passed by roughly about 60-40, so passed by a majority. And what it did was to encourage the select board, to encourage the town manager not to make the PAAC Access Program a town department at this time. But what that really means, from what I gathered, is it's advisory. The contract will end at September 30th. It still is within the legal purview of the select board to choose whether to renew it, extend it, modify it, or do nothing, or take it in-house. And that is a decision point where the select board is right now. They're trying to figure out what to do next. They will be meeting with the town manager's office, as I understand, to discuss this, as well as trying to figure out what's going to be the best thing for the town of Concord, but I would also think what's good for Carlisle. Part of that depends on what you folks decide to do. So that's a very short synopsis of what's going on. While I've been waiting for this committee to form, because we need a 4th person for a quorum before we can actually meet. One person is going to be a delegate from the school committee, and I think the school committee is waiting until your election, because you have 1 seat that's going to be replaced Melissa, I believe, her term is up, before they decide who's going to be the school committee representative for my committee. And then there's the ex officio schedule for Carlisle, and then whatever else happens with the others, I don't know, with the other seats. I report to the select board. I don't report to the town manager. So our committee is appointed by the select board. So that's kind of a little bit of the structure. Meanwhile, I've been looking at doing data, trying to figure out what's been going on in the Comcast world, in the PEG access world, because that's kind of my background. I used to work for the Department of Telecommunications and Cable. I was the director of the cable division, so I kind of oversaw a lot of what happens across the state. And in that capacity, I reviewed franchise agreements. I dealt with a lot with the Comcast rate case. There's one going on right now, which they're proposing to raise the rates for Concord as well as Carlisle and the other 82 regulated communities in Massachusetts. So I've got a background in that, in the regulatory arena. And that's kind of where we are at this point. I'm going to stop now and see what questions you have for me.
That's great. Wow. It always amazes me the backgrounds that people have in Concord and Carlisle.
So if we were to,
No, go ahead. We'll let Claude go next.
Sounds like a reset button.
so if we were to choose to go, or with CCTV, we would be negotiating a contract directly with CCTV, correct? And if we were to, if Concord decides to bring it in-house, would we be, and we wanted to go with Concord, would we be negotiating a contract with your group or directly with the Board of Selectmen?
Well, that's an easy question to answer. You will never be contracting with me, because I'm part of a citizen advisory group.
Okay, you're an
A
advisory
cable
group,
advisory commission equivalent, which a lot of towns have. Usually those committees are formed about the time you have your franchise renewal agreement done. By the way, as a note, I've mentioned this to him, yours expires in 2021, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so.
And usually there's about a 3-year process to do the renewal process, which means you should be starting about now. Okay, 2018. It could be a 36-month process for the informal, then a short period. So if you haven't started, I think Tim's already contacted folks, which is a good thing. It means you're planning for it in advance. So you wouldn't be in contract with us because we're a volunteer group.
So we would be working directly with Tim, I guess. Tim, the other Tim. Oh, Chris.
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 Yes, yeah.
Right. In my last conversation with Chris Whalen, he was being encouraged to accept a proposal from CCTV to continue operating the service and to forestall the takeover by the town of Concord. And to my knowledge, he might have some of that information, but he hasn't communicated back to us that that's the direction that they're going to go in, or whether they're going to go forward with taking it on as a town department. So it sounds like there's at least some energy in having, or interest rather, in having CCTV remain in place.
It just kind of makes it a little difficult for us, though, because we don't want to start negotiating with CCTV if CCTV is going to be absorbed into Concord, right?
Right, which way I think it is probably an opportune
Or maybe we do
occasion
want to
to-
start negotiating with them now.
I mean, there's an offer to have a Carlisle representative on the essentially the Citizens Advisory Committee. I don't see any downside to us having someone, in the room listening to what is going on. And Christine Lear is very interested in, if the board, so chooses, in representing Carlisle on, that advisory committee.
Do we have
The
an
PEG access.
email or anything from her?
What's that?
Do we have an email or anything from her?
Well, she'll be the appointment, right?
I don't know if we got an email, but I met with
Yeah.
Christine and with Carlin a week or so ago, and she's very interested. And I know she's had conversations, I think maybe with Carrie in the past, and Claude as well.
And I've
Christine
spoken
is
to her as
very
well.
much interested in being part of that if we want her to be.
So, just to recap and to make sure I'm understanding. Your Citizen Advisory Committee is going to advise the Concord Select Board as to whether to authorize Tim then to, not Tim, sorry,
On a whole-
Chris.
Let me stop you there. There's a whole bunch of stuff. PEG access is only one small part of it. Another part is advising the select board on how to monitor Comcast's performance under its franchise agreement with Concord. Another part is when it's time for Concord to do its renewal, to help assist with the renewal process, holding public hearings, gathering input on complaints, that sort of stuff. PEG access is the piece that's getting the most attention right now, but it's 3 pieces, and those are the 3 purposes under the statute for which the PEG access funds can be used.
Okay, because we had been approached by Chris and the assistant town
Kate
manager,
Hodges, yes.
To do this other thing where they were going to move away from the high school, they were gonna go into the extension building and have their offices in there.
Right.
And is that on hold now?
I
Dan?
cannot speak for the town manager's office. I cannot speak for the select board manager's office. You'll have to talk to them directly. All I can say is everything is on the table as far as I can tell. This is my personal opinion. You understand the restrictions on what I can say.
I understand, I'm just trying to understand what
I think the answer is yes.
Yeah.
the landscape looks like.
Right.
I think it's kind of on hold at the moment.
Yeah.
So, more or less, our former discussions are kind of like on hold.
No, I'll contact the town manager and get a report, especially in the wake of the town meeting vote that kind of encouraged a second look at the
Yeah,
process.
Right.
okay.
Yeah, because I mean, ultimately, ultimately, if we sign up with CCTV and they get absorbed by the town of Concord, wouldn't any sort of agreement we have with CCTV have
Well,
to
kind
hold?
of, yeah, I think it would sort of be the same thing, right?
Right.
Wouldn't it? Yeah, I mean, we'd end up in the same place.
Right, yeah, so options 1 and 2 are basically the
Mhm.
same, right?
Well,
I mean, it'd be
except-
weird if we went the
except-
other way and then they didn't, and then,
Well,
right?
except in one, we're negotiating terms with CCTV.
Right, right, but ultimately, if we were content with those terms and Concord absorbed.
Well,
My-
and I think it's actually quite different because, the finances of a town department versus the finances of a nonprofit are very different. I
Yeah.
mean, in terms of, pensions and things like that. So the staffing would be different, I think. And so, it would be, quantitatively different in terms of the number of hours we could expect from staff time and things like that, just because of the way the finances are going to be changing when, the money is constant, right?
Right.
It's a pretty fixed amount of money. It's pretty
Right.
regular.
Right,
So depending on how the employees are sort of,
yeah.
are they presumably they'd be full-time, and then they would have pension, and then the cost would go up, and then there would be fewer employees, and then, so it would be quite different, I think.
Yeah, the nice thing about the Concord agreement, though, was that it was just a lump sum, right? And we would get, they were absorbing all the burden of employees and salaries and benefits and.
Right, but
Yeah.
we don't have like a comparison to say, this is what we're currently getting from CCTV, and in terms of,
Yeah.
services, and then,
Right.
it seemed to me kind of vague, their proposal. They said, okay, give us this amount of money, and then they said, okay, here's a person, so many hours, but.
And we weren't clear where the person was living.
Well, there was
whether
all of
they were
Right,
that.
where are they
there.
gonna be? They're gonna be
Yeah,
based out of
exactly.
Concord, so does that include driving back and
Yeah.
forth all the time? And,
Right, right.
Yeah.
So-
what skills does this person have? Can they teach, classes, or are they just going to be televising meetings, or,
Right.
there's all kinds of, and I think all of this happened because the town manager came to us, right? Otherwise, this was completely off our radar, and we're like, the agreement has been expired for a while, but it's just kind of going on autopilot.
Yeah.
And now, so then we start looking at it, and we find that the school committee wants to televise their meetings, but the agreement, or the tacit agreement we have, I don't know if it's explicit, is that the school committee meetings are not covered. We're not gonna get any help, other than, okay, here's some equipment that you might wanna use to do that meeting, right? Which is very different from having it manned and so on and so forth.
Right,
So,
right.
so that begs the question, and Concord, I think, one of the reasons the town manager wanted to make this change was, well, I want more of our meeting covered.
Yeah.
But it's not clear that there's actually staff time, even in a nonprofit, to accomplish that, unless you make changes as to how that's done.
Right.
Automation. Now you can get for $800, you can get a piece of equipment that you basically put on the table, has a very wide angle lens, very high definition, and it automatically basically can zoom in on whoever's talking and, and streams right to YouTube. So, we've gone, when I started with cable TV, it took 4 people to televise a meeting, 1 person on each of 3 cameras plus another person at a switcher, and we all had headphones and you would talk. Now 1 person could sit in over there and use a joystick and manipulate all the cameras and everything. So it's gone from 4 to 1. The way technology is going, it's going to go from 1 to 0.
Right.
So, and this is happening now. I mean, this is not the future. This is today, right now. So, I think there's a lot going on here, and if CCTV continues to exist, yeah, I think maybe we just continue with the arrangement we have. But if we want to do the school committee in addition to selectmen, I don't know that they can do that given the budget they have, and it's just ours.
Yeah.
And in some sense, even, we are actually using probably more of a percentage of their resources than we're entitled to based on our contribution, because we're doing selectmen's and town meeting, and, yes, maybe they do school committee and town meeting, but, still, we're such a smaller town and we're contributing less that
Yep.
that's actually, we're slightly getting more than we deserve. So, and yet we want to do school committee. So how's that all going to work?
Yeah.
That's to me the conundrum.
Right, so ultimately, though,
Well, may I ask?
sure. You're breaking up a little bit
May I
there.
ask a couple of questions? Yeah, I know my connection here isn't all that great. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yep.
Just in terms of circling back, when CCTV ran the show, they had their own board. It consisted of 2 people, voting members from Carlisle, and an ex officio member from the Board of Selectmen. They basically, as a non-for-profit, claimed that they were the advisory board of the community as well as the board of CCTV. I believe that's pretty much how they characterize themselves. And when the town of Carlisle wanted to take over that responsibility, certain people, I think probably CCTV board members may have led the way on this, said, well, if you do that, you won't have community input. It'll be a government-run program and won't have community input. And I think that was the impetus to have your advisory committee formed in the first place. Does that sound about right?
Well, there was a cable advisory committee that was in existence up until 2011, and then it was disbanded for, I don't know why, lack of interest perhaps. And then at that time I was still working with the department, so I couldn't join. But I retired about 3 years ago, and recently I heard about this opportunity, so I've been kind of encouraging the formation of this committee for that very reason, because I know there's a lot you can do.
This represents a new
It's a revival, I would think would be a better way of doing it, and that it has a slightly different name and a much longer charter, but essentially the same kind of stuff. Act as a source for citizen input on the programming, but also consumer complaints against Comcast, helping to resolve those, that sort of stuff.
So, irrespective of whether CCTV stayed in place or whether Concord absorbed those responsibilities and contracts, irrespective of any of that, you would still be a community advisory committee consisting of the way you're recommending.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So you're really independent, for the most part, of whatever else is going on behind the doors and between Carlisle and Concord, and between Concord and CCTV.
You say independent, but really we depend on what happens, because what we can do depends on the formation, but I don't really care who runs the PEG Access program. I just want good public programming, and I want good responsibility from Comcast to providing cable TV service.
Right.
And that's what the committee's really going to be doing.
Right.
So,
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
it seems to me like, we've been talking about this on and off for a long time, and it seems to me like we need to decide what we want to do.
Yeah.
And the contract with Concord, that they proposed was, it was a fixed amount, but it was also a fixed number of hours.
Right, 170.
And it didn't have anything in there for like, what if you go over those hours?
Right.
Is there a per hour charge or something like that? But other than that, it was a pretty good contract. But I think that we should figure out what path do we want to go, and we should do it really, really soon.
Yep.
And stop just talking about it.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And we need to, if it's that we want to go to CCTV, we should go to CCTV
Yep.
and start that process.
Right.
Clearly, we have to wait before we go to Concord until they decide what they want, because they probably don't want to talk to us yet. But I think that the earlier we start talking to CCTV, if that's the path we want to go down, the better we are. And, perhaps there's, how much did we pay CCTV before? Was it everything we got in PEG?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, there was some money that we had in sort of a capital fund that we spent independent of
Right, it was
CCTV,
the
right?
subscriber, yeah, it was 100% of the subscriber revenue, and the capital payments from Comcast, we kind of held for some time, and then we, purchased the equipment in this room.
This equipment in this room was
Yeah.
paid directly
Out of that.
by
Right,
us.
and so I think that type of thing would continue, right? And it was our, so anyway, I think that, we just need to figure out what we want to do.
Right.
And move it forward, and
I think you're correct in that, and I think based on what happened last night, that CCTV has a feeling that they're going to continue to provide services, and that they're looking forward to the opportunity to provide broader services both to Concord and Carlisle, because they've been, there's been a lot of criticism about the way they've handled things as a not-for-profit in the past. They've fought that tooth and nail through whatever means they could, and I think they feel that last night's vote was sort of a vindication of their position, and that they're going to prevail going forward, at least in the short term. That's my sense of, in terms of who we might need to be dealing with. We should probably keep the channel open to CCTV unless we hear otherwise from both them and the town of Concord.
Right, and so the types of things that I want to try to avoid are if I'm remembering correctly, the contract between Concord and CCTV gave Concord ownership of all the equipment.
Yeah.
Even though we have been paying for part of that. And so we need to be at that table, or we need to be there ahead of time, making sure that that contract is going to represent our interests, rather than we just have to kind of, it was actually, one of the reasons why we just decided to extend the contract was because it was so difficult to figure out how to contract with CCTV, given the contract they already had with the town of Concord. We were kind of left out.
Right.
And any contract that we signed kind of would have not been enforceable. So if we're going to go down the CCTV route, I think we should start talking to them right away.
Yeah, I agree.
And clearly, we need to start negotiating with Comcast as well.
So, hold on, sorry. Claude?
So while we have you here, based on your experience and your knowledge of the industry, the revenue that we get from Comcast comes from their cable subscription things, but not from their internet.
Let me explain briefly.
Yeah.
You have 1,515 Comcast cable TV subscribers in the town of Carlisle right now. That number is reported to the Department of Telecommunications every year. It's the number of subscribers as of December 31. That number is one of the pieces of the equation of how the funding comes. The funding is from the gross revenues of cable TV services offered in Carlisle. It's not the broadband part. It's from the cable services. So, for example, on my bill, I'm a Comcast cable subscriber. My bill, I don't have their internet. I have the digital package. I pay about $100 a month. Of that $100, roughly $6 goes to the PEG access. Okay, and if you think of it another way, out of that $100, about $20 of it is regulated by the department for the basic tier service. basic tier equipment, and some installation. So the other $80 out of that 100 is not regulated by the department. I was looking at your numbers for subscribers over the last 4 years, based on what I can tell from the department's records, and your subscriber numbers are holding pretty steady at 1,500. 1498, 1513, 1520, 1550. So the number of people who are watching cable TV in your town is pretty stable. Your bills are not, because Comcast is raising its rates. They have an annual hearing before the department, and if in the current docket, which is DTC 17-4, you can look at it online, you can see the proposed rates. There's an ongoing rate case going on right now. They had the public hearing, I think, March 31st, and the Carlisle rates will go up for the basic tier about $1.50 a month per person, per account. So that's kind of how it progresses. The revenues are based on all of the cable revenues, which includes the basic tier, but also the taxes, the fees, and all the things that Comcast adds on. And I did an average revenue per user calculation. That number keeps going up. It's about $17 a person now, per quarter for the basic tier service. So the revenues seem to be going up a little bit. Your subscriber base is pretty steady. So for the and I'm thinking that would gross you about $100,000 a year for PEG access. Okay, by contrast, Concord is about $400,000 a year. So it's about 1-to-4 ratio between the two. Concord has about 6,000 subscribers, and their numbers are holding pretty steady, going down a little bit. But the revenues are that's the ratio. Okay.
So I'm a Comcast customer, but all I have is internet. So
you don't contribute at all. You get it for free. You watch CCTV on the internet, you get it for free.
Right, exactly. And I'm not contributing to the PEG access
Not
fund.
contributing to it, though.
So the more
You're not paying a
people-
franchise charge. That's what it is.
Right. So the more people who migrate over to internet only, that's going to reduce, the PEG revenue. In other words, if everybody
No, because remember, it isn't just the numbers. It's all those extra fees and the charges and the increases that Comcast adds to the bill. So that whole bill, not just the $20, but the whole $100, is used to calculate the franchise-related cost. So that's why the actual dollar amount of the franchise fee has been going up from $4 to $5 to about $6 a month. Take a look at your bill. The subscriber numbers alone don't tell the whole story. You have to look at the revenues. Does that make sense?
Well, but I'm wondering if everybody was internet only,
Okay.
then there would be no PEG access money, right? Is that correct?
That's correct, because broadband revenues are not considered cable TV revenues.
Right.
That's an if, though. That's a hypothetical.
No, it's a hypothetical, but I think it's one that, in other words, what I'm trying to say is that although we're getting $100,000 a year now, things could shift very quickly if, the rage becomes cable cutting. If people sense that the fees are too high and they like the more a la carte approach of broadband
Right.
to watch television, that we could see those dropping off. And then, we don't have that 100,000, and we have to sort of figure out some other thing. So
That's why if we do a contract, it should be linked to.
Right.
I don't think that's going to happen in the next.
The numbers aren't
years.
bearing it out. I mean, you have people who like to watch
I don't wanna- I
ESPN
wouldn't bet on
and
it. I mean, one way or the
Game
other.
of Thrones, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
And they like to watch on their TVs sometimes,
Right.
and they don't all do it over the internet. I watch CCTV over the internet. I watch it on the channels as well, every place possible. It's a great video transcript of, this meeting. I've been watching you folks the last couple of months, courtesy of CCTV. No, it's great, and I'm enjoying the humor very much.
See, I got a fan! All right.
I got a fan.
All right, no, that's good to know.
What else
Yeah.
can I answer for you?
No, I think that's great.
I see absolutely no downside of appointing a member
No,
to
right.
that committee, an ex officio or not. I'm wondering if we shouldn't consider forming our own access committee to give us some, because frankly, I don't have the time of day to know enough about this stuff. We'd love to have some committee of really interested citizens, and Claude will have lots of time once he's no longer on the board to head something like this up.
Yeah.
To advise us
on
Right.
like what we should be doing.
Rather than
Yeah.
us sitting here passively,
Right.
waiting for Concord to make up
Right.
their minds, you
Yeah.
know? And finding out all this information, which, you know,
Right.
even though we've been over it a couple of times, I gotta tell you, it's still a little hazy on.
Yeah, no, exactly, exactly. So, I mean, I guess the action items now are to follow up with CCTV. We get the ball rolling there, follow up with Chris in Concord to see what they're doing.
Yeah.
If they even have a plan. Yeah, we could get Christine appointed, at least for now, to that.
I would appreciate having her appointed as the ex officio
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
If there's an opportunity to have a voting position on the committee, I think that would be advisable too. That's just my
Yeah.
personal
Yeah.
recommendation.
No, I think that's an excellent idea, and I think the board would agree with that. right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I think that's kind of where things stand now. We're still not really at the point to make a decision, but hopefully, you know, if we can get some clarification as to where Concord is. I mean, if they're not gonna move forward, then we shouldn't be beholden to.
I
And
think
then, and we shouldn't be left stalled in the water.
No, exactly.
Because, well, now it's too late for us to start our
Right.
negotiations.
Right, I worry about setting up a committee, just that I think we need to move faster than that.
Yeah, no, I think
But
that would be
I
after.
do think that we
kinda-
need to,
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you need some advice on, for the committee members, whoever wants to, just let me know. Tim has my contact information. I'm happy to meet with whoever.
Yeah.
isn't an appointment
Yeah.
in here.
Yeah, well, we've got that, it'll be later, right?
Oh, I was just gonna do it now while she was here.
Is Christine here?
Oh, no.
7?
Was she coming?
7.
Oh, it's number 7, it's not under appointments, okay. I move that the Board of Selectmen vote to appoint Christine Lear, 120 Oak Knoll Road, to serve as the Carlisle representative to the Concord Public Access Advisory Committee with a 1-year term that will expire on June 30th, 2010.
Second.
2018.
Yeah,
Well,
is that-
2019.
2019.
I'm just reading as it's written.
2010. Yeah. Yeah, so it will
June
be
30th,
2019.
2019.
Yeah. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Oscar Lilo, aye?
Kissinger, aye.
Reed, aye.
Kissinger, aye.
You already-
we heard ya.
You only get one vote, Carrie.
Brown eye?
Von Roskin, aye.
Great.
That's the
Thank
name of
you,
the
folks.
person.
No,
who's
thank you for
been-
coming in. This has been very helpful.
Yes, I have our information already.
Okay, all right.
And, yeah, that expiration term is kind of odd, but,
Yeah.
okay, good.
Well, we're kind of an odd bunch.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Yeah, Thank you.
All right, so technically, we're still 15 minutes ahead of schedule, even though it doesn't look like it.
Well, what are we gonna do about, we identified it again as an issue.
I know.
But we still haven't come up with any kind of a solution.
No.
There's something at 7:45.
Yeah,
that
so,
we missed.
yeah, don't worry. But,
Okay.
but we're a half an hour ahead with this. We're at 30 minutes, so we're 15
Oh,
minutes
I
ahead.
see.
Yeah, we
I see.
jumped
I'm like,
ahead. We jumped
You
ahead.
completed your 8:30
Exactly.
Now I got you.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we already
Steve,
went by
are you
yours.
here for Deer Committee as well?
He's here with me.
You guys want to come on up?
We're together today.
We're going to punt it to the next meeting. Why, do you want to discuss it more? Do you wanna punt it
It's
to
just
the
getting
next-
frustrating that it's not
I wonder if
getting
there's a
anywhere.
chair
Oh, yeah,
mechanic
yeah,
that we
but I
could
think-
hire to come in
I think
and
next
Is
meeting,
the
once we
magical
have-
sinking chair?
probably an
I
O-ring or
tried
something.
to
in
chair a
there.
meeting while it's sinking. It's very embarrassing.
it's awful.
Quite distracting.
But just to kind of finalize that last bit, I think, you know, once we collect the information from the town of Concord, once we get the ball rolling with CCTV a bit, and we get a copy of, they must have
Who's
some
getting
sort
the
of
ball
draft.
rolling with CCTV?
Tim, I would think.
I guess we could just say, hey, we need to meet with you.
Right?
Sure.
I was gonna-
Because that's who we're
I
meeting
was
with,
looking at
right
Tim.
back there.
Yeah, but she's not gonna do the contract stuff.
Yeah.
No, exactly, no, she's shaking her
Yeah.
head.
Oh,
Yeah, no, so I think Tim, right, yeah, you'll reach out, you've got the contact.
I would
so,
start with CCTV.
Yeah, yeah, and then also too, just find out what's going on with Concord, so we can have a more complete picture, and then, sorry, I think the Claude option is gonna fall
Well,
to
the
third,
CLUD
but-
option, remember, there was only 2 options, right? It was either go with the municipal, it was a fait accompli, right? When
Right,
town
right.
manager came in.
No,
So
exactly.
now there's sort of 3 options, and in light of that, I'm not sure that,
That's fine.
but I think there's a lot of change potentially coming down the pike
Yes.
that needs to be
No, that's right.
factored in.
Number 3, yep.
Get stuff out of my space.
Back to number 3.
Yeah, back to 3. All right. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
So yeah, Carrie was the one that actually put this back on our radar. I mean, we had the public discussion, what, a couple of months ago now?
Yeah, I think it was the last week of January, maybe 1st of February, sometime then.
Right, and then there was a second one, right, that was snowed out. Was there a follow-up one to that one? Or no?
No,
Okay.
no, there was just this one discussion for the Deer Committee proposed regs in January. There was a conservation coffee that was
Oh, okay.
publicly announced, but it wasn't a hearing, and that was well attended. Were there in the teens?
I'm in there.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think there might have been, yeah, it was the biggest I've been to in some time.
Yeah. Great.
Um,
So, Carrie, do you want to give an update, or as a selectman rep, or do you want Lee to just give an update, or?
Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is not a bylaw change, this is a regulation adoption, and as such, we can approve it as Board of Selectmen. And I believe the regulations as now proposed have been distributed. I believe you have a copy of them for enough time to take a look at them. They're pretty straightforward. There has been community input that's been listened to. I don't think every last citizen concern has been addressed, but a lot of them are
You're breaking up.
500 feet from my house. Hello?
Yep.
Time to repeat.
Yeah, you're gonna have to repeat that, sorry.
I think we've gotten.
Lee, take over.
I think we've gotten enough community input, and I'm prepared to move that we adopt these regulations this evening.
All right. So, yeah, just a little more clarification, too. You know, we initially thought we'd have to take this to town meeting. There was that non-binding vote, was it 2 or 3 years ago?
2015 now, yeah.
Yeah, geez. But it turns out there actually is something in the bylaws regarding deer hunting. So it's a change in the regulation, you know, kind of tightening it up a bit. But basically, the bylaw already allows the Board of Selectmen to approve, and correct me if I'm wrong, but approve deer hunting on town land. I mean, obviously, you know, we would go kind of beyond that a little bit with this in terms of getting CONSCOM involved and that sort of thing, but ultimately it doesn't need to go to town meeting. So if people do want a permit, they would have to come before us, right? And ultimately, we would be the issuing board. So, you know,
Although you would authorize an agent to manage that for you and present it to you. So
Exactly.
essentially, these regulations are an attempt to put processes in place that allow you to permit people to hunt on the public property in the goal of reducing the deer population to some extent. It's to do so without really adding to your burden. So you would appoint a deer agent. We have an applicant in mind. He's been serving on the committee and he's a town resident. He'd get a nominal stipend, mainly because it's a real pain in the ankle to do this kind of work. As a highlight, all of the hunters would go through criminal background checks before the hunting season each year. This would be considered a trial period with specific locations that we've already, our trails representative and people from the board have looked at. And they'd work to get things in place. To make this work, we have to set up a revolving account to accept fees and to pay for expenses. We're hoping it'll be a self-sufficient program, if not the first year, then soon, very soon thereafter.
So, quick question.
Yes.
It says that the hunter's fee is $30 a year.
Yes.
How much is a criminal background check?
It's performed by the police. It's not a Corey check. It's a criminal background check. A Corey check is
So there's no
separate.
cost to that?
There's no cost to us for that.
Okay.
At the public hearing in January, there were a
Mhm.
number of things I heard.
Yes.
One of them was the length of the season.
Mm-hmm.
I think I saw that.
And
was
we
not
have
addressed in
modified
Yes.
that, yes.
Okay. The other thing that I recall hearing was the time of day.
Yeah.
and I had a hard time locating it here.
There are no, we did, the committee thought about the two requests and found that if the goal is to reduce the deer population, you have to actually let the hunters be there. And we found that it would be, we thought it would be more appropriate to curtail the season than to have them in and out for twice as many days. I think it's more disruptive to the community to have more days impacted than to have a few days that are off. And similarly, Sundays remain an illegal hunting day in Massachusetts, so even during the season, there are no hunters in the woods on Sundays, period.
Trying to remember if there's.
There was a notification, a request as well, and that one we could not, we really couldn't find a method of notification that we thought would be workable. We thought instead what we would do is have the deer agent introduce the people, introduce the hunters, and that way we can have the hunters work out with any abutters what they want. We're still going to do complete signage of all of the public entrances to the land.
Okay, well, I just wanted to kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Ensure that we had
Okay.
addressed each of those. And those considerations are actually in minutes. We just haven't had a chance to vote on
Yeah.
those and adopt those minutes yet.
Okay.
But, you know, to emphasize for the public's sake, this is something that we've proposed as a trial season, with the hope that when the town votes on the proposal, if you do decide to take it to town meeting or to a vote, that they're voting from a place of knowledge rather than a place of having read, you know, whatever urban myth or rural myth has been promulgated for the last 50 years or something like that. Other people's experiences might not line up with ours.
About 2 weeks ago, I was walking the dog and we saw 5 deer across the street.
Yeah, I ran into 5 deer driving home this week.
I have 6 in my backyard all
It
the
must be
time.
the same clump.
Yeah, it's an interesting family group, yeah.
Is anybody here?
Yeah.
Want to,
Anybody here for deer?
anybody here to talk about this topic?
No, we had a pretty good turnout at the public.
We had
hearing.
good, yeah, I mean, there's been public interest, and we had a few people from out of town actually coming to weigh in on the matter. We've had a couple of hunters reach out to ask for information, and I believe some abutters of the public trails have actually asked that we let them know so that they can give permission to hunt. And so that's, you know, so that they can enlarge the boundary as needed. There are, of course, other abutters who feel quite the opposite.
Yeah, so there was really, I mean, the folks there, they were all pretty much against it.
Yes.
You know, and it was more of a safety thing. You know, and I think that's why, you know, hopefully, being able to introduce the hunter to residents in the area, because, you know, there was the idea proposed about the text notifications, you know, just so.
Yeah.
Because people didn't like the idea of not knowing that there was a hunter in the woods, you know, which, you know, fair enough. You know, so the more information that could be out there, just to kind of quell those fears, you know, I think, you know, the committee heard that loud and clear at the last.
There is currently hunting permitted on private land as long as you can stay far enough away from
Correct.
homes, right?
Also as
And
on
there's-
federal land.
And there's also hunting permitted over at the wildlife refuge, right?
Yes.
Right.
And there are trails in the wildlife refuge, and I don't believe there's any setback actually to the trails on the wildlife refuge.
Is that bow only as well?
Oh, I just wanted to ask one other thing. So, the Greeno land, did you reduce the number on that?
No, we checked what the permits that they were talking about the maps that were challenged.
Yeah.
We checked those property lines and reconfirmed them, and they
Okay.
are correct.
Okay, I'm just
Yeah.
trying to remember.
No, and we weren't planning to put a hunter in the middle of a pond either.
right.
But there were some large areas that have no trails anywhere near them
Okay.
that are totally appropriate,
All right.
in our opinion.
Right, yeah, and another thing that came out, and, you know, I saw this when I was on CONSCOM, and I'm sure you're still seeing it,
Yeah.
is that there is illegal hunting going on. I mean,
Yeah.
seems like every year they're pulling a tree stand out of the town forest.
Yeah, so there are hunters in these public properties that people are unaware of as we speak, and they're not following laws. And so
Right.
we figure some presence there will actually curtail this somewhat.
Yep. So, like other things, I think, we'll see how a year goes, and then, reevaluate and,
Yeah.
See if there are issues, complaints, that sort of thing. I think, like most towns, it's probably gonna be getting over that initial fear hump, and then, and get the feedback, and then kind of see how it continues.
So if you vote to go forward with this, I'll need authorization to work presumably with Tim, with council, and whoever it is I need to work with to do things like set up the revolving account and get the procedures established.
Do we want to do that tonight so that we don't have to do this again?
Yeah, I have no
Is there any
issue.
reason why
Some
we
of
wouldn't
these-
do this tonight?
Some of the classes we're requiring them to take are many, many weeks.
Yeah.
And so we need to give them the opportunity to be able to get themselves certified.
It's his baby.
Yeah, Carrie, do you wanna make the motion?
We're not hearing you.
Are you on mute?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Hello?
Yes, we hear you now.
Yeah, I move that the Board of Selectmen accept the recommendation of the Deer Committee as presented at the April 10th, 2018 Board of Selectmen meeting, and adopt the proposed regulations for deer hunting on Carlisle town land.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Oscar Lilloye?
Kissinger, aye.
Reed, aye.
Brown eye.
Von Roskin, aye.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you for all your
you.
work on this.
Thank you. We'll keep
And
going,
in
but.
advance for all the rest of the work that we know.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is gonna
so
be-
we will talk about, we'll continue as a committee, and we'll need to talk about what you want to set up going forward after this hunting season, whether you want to make a permanent committee or what. I believe all of our terms expire this June, so we'll need, or the end of just June, so we'll need to be reappointed.
Yeah, I think.
Or
so
have other
many
people.
peoples do,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
Just,
Thank you.
minor paperwork details.
How
Thanks.
you doing? I haven't seen you for a while.
Thank you for all your work on this.
I'm a little sore from carrying the chainsaw around.
Are you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and apparently he's having a tooth yank tomorrow, so.
Oh, pleasant, yeah.
Thank you for all your work on
Yeah,
this.
yeah, thank you
Take care
both.
again.
All right. So now look at that. Wow, we're a half
Are
an hour.
you
ahead.
on?
Yeah, so we're on our 8:15, but I'm 2 minutes ahead and a full half an hour.
Yeah, so Carrie, Sabrina's here.
How you doing? Do you want to come up to the table?
Hello.
So does everybody know Miss Perry? Sabrina Perry, okay. So Carrie, you wanted to put this on the agenda, and we had a minor discussion last week about some proposed options, and you had sent out an email. Was that just to me, or was that to the, everybody? Yeah. So,
I think everyone has received,
It's in the park. It's in the packet.
yeah, so I will let,
I have two bars. I have a very poor connection, so I hope you can hear me well enough. In the information that I passed around as far as background, it included what I saw as 4 options for dealing with Center Park going forward. The reason Sabrina is here, she's the founder of the park and has led in its development over the last 10 or 11 years, has raised virtually all of the funding to bring the park into being and maintain it at a very high level over all that period of time. And a little over a year ago, as she was decided to move away from Carlisle, wanted to get some assurance of me that Center Park would continue to be maintained. We formed the committee, a standing committee for Center Park, and that process and that model of providing support for Center Park has not worked successfully. The committee no longer exists. The members of it have resigned, and so we're back to thinking about what do we do without that sort of committee, which, by the way, had spending authority as given to them by the Board of Selectmen, and also the Board of Selectmen provided $6,000 of town funding for the support of the Center Park at last May's town meeting. Much of those dollars still exist in the Center Park Fund. Some dollars still exist from donated dollars that were provided by private citizens in part of the park on a tax deductible basis. So there's about $5,000 in the Center Park Fund. And the question is, what do we do now that there's no standing committee, there's no spending authority designated other than the Board of Selectmen, basically? How do we move forward in a sensible way? And it seemed to me that there were 4 ways that we could potentially move forward. One was to provide the management of the park to the DPW and provide the DPW with the wherewithal to contract for services required to maintain the park that they didn't normally provide in the course of their activities. So it would basically Center Park funded by the town. Because if that were the model that was adopted, where the DPW were the lead in maintaining it, it was generally felt that there would be any private source of donated funding from citizens would dry up very quickly. So that's sort of one thing that we could look at as a going forward position. A second thing would be to basically go back to the business the way it was before the standing committee was created. And in that model going forward, Sabrina Perry, the founder and prime mover for the park, would once again be given the responsibility for number 8 fundraising, as she has in the past, and also for contracting or providing services to maintain the park, on the understanding that the town would provide no funding for the park, and we go back to the way it's been for the last 10 or 11 years, where her activities and efforts and energies have basically raised all the money necessary to maintain the park. So that would be a second way that we could go forward. I've had a brief exchange of his agreement with that, assuming that responsibility. A third way of opting to move ahead would be to adopt a model that is already in place in a number of activities in town, and that would be to create a Friends of the Park, which would be a non-for-profit organization board that would be formed to raise money, to maintain the park, to basically take over all of the decisions and operations necessary to keep the park going forward. The Council on Aging has a Friends group, the library has a Friends group. It certainly is a model that can work successfully. However, it does require that a Friends group be organized, be formed, be chartered as a corporation, not-for-profit corporation, and have enough proponents of it to carry out the responsibilities that they would adopt for themselves. So that would be a third way of moving ahead. The fourth way of moving ahead would be to basically let the DPW park and provide only those services that they normally would provide in the normal conduct of their activities, and provide no financial support for those activities beyond normal activities for the DPW. So those seem to me to be the 4 options that we have going forward. If we did adopt the 4th one of the DPW, basically just doing what they would normally do, we would be effectively walking away from maintaining any of the design and implementation of the park that's taken place over the past 10 years. investment in the park in a way that would make it ultimately lie fallow until and unless someone said, we shouldn't let this happen, and if we ought to turn it around, and if that were the case, then we'd be spending a lot more money to get it back to where it was or get it back to an acceptable level. So the deferred maintenance approach, while it wouldn't cost us anything more out of pocket than we'd normally spend with DPW activities, would defer maintenance and maybe a potential downstream cost. So those, as I saw it briefly, would be the 4 ways of going forward. And I've spoken with Tim about this, about working with Sabrina, the potential for doing that, so that Sabrina would only be able to spend monies that were raised by her from private sources and placed into the Center Park Fund in a not-for-profit tax-deductible basis. And that they would then work together on Sabrina assessing what was required to maintain the park, assessing the dollars involved to do that, in each case of what was needed, going to Tim to make sure that the funds were available and get the authorization to spend those funds. So that's where I think we are. Open to discussion. Sabrina, if you have any comments you'd like to make, I defer to Luke to let him decide whether he wants to have you speak, and if so, for how long. But that's all. That's about. If there are any questions for me, please feel free to direct them to me, and that's all I have as input.
Thanks, Gary.
My recommendation is that the second approach of having Sabrina back in the saddle, if you will, with Tim's help, would be an approach that maintains passionate interest in the park, doesn't cost the town a nickel out of town funds, and although the only downside I see is that may be a somewhat a temporary approach, because sooner or later Sabrina's going to need more help than she can provide just on her own if she's not able to get others involved. I think she'd need to get others involved in assisting her with a future role for some committee or some other way to keep the park moving forward. But in the meantime, she's it, and I would recommend that we do that in the meantime.
So I have some questions, if I may.
Sure.
So, you know, the one thing that that concerns me is just making sure that the funds that are raised are spent appropriately per the, you know, whatever laws on the of a nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have everything that we need in order to be able to do that. Like,
I think we do. I think maybe in the past, we weren't giving donors, every donor, the proper paperwork to ensure that the deduction is deductible, and we'd want to be more scrupulous about that, I think. And also spending, you know, keeping the spending in line with what we've actually got on hand.
Yeah.
Sometimes we've kind of had some timing issues with.
right, so, because if the
with
money's
work.
coming into the town, it should be the town that is acknowledging, right?
The donation.
With the proper paperwork.
Yes, yeah. And we can do that. I
Okay.
think.
Right.
So it's not,
So that wouldn't be
it's
a
not zero
501c3
cost to the town, but it's
then,
zero
right?
additional cost to the town.
Correct.
And then how does how, Carrie, how do we foresee the approval process working for expenditures?
Well, Sabrina would have to basically say for the coming period, let's say it's a 1-month period, these are the things that I'd like to have done. Put an ad in the newspaper to raise funds, pay someone to do the mulching and liming and trimming of the shrubs, etc. Based on past experience, this is what I think it will cost. She would go to Tim and say, these are my anticipated expenses for the coming period, and request that those funds funds be released to her to do that.
Okay, so,
Specific amount.
okay, so it would be, she would go to Tim and with a specific amount, and it's kind of like a not to exceed amount, so that we're not spending more money than what has been approved for that month.
Yeah,
That's what we need to do.
right, because that was an issue in the past, right?
And so then, but then, does Sabrina then have, like, how do we give her the actual spending authority? Like,
Yeah,
you know,
that's where,
because,
yeah, see, I think that's where it
because
gets
she doesn't
complicated.
have the ability to commit us to
Right.
paying
Well,
something.
maybe it's easier if she would, you know, I would contact the vendor on her behalf, because
Right.
I can, you know, make a contract with someone or authorize the work, because it's coming out of the town
Yeah.
fund. I mean, there are kind of a group of vendors that have been used over the years, so there's kind of a pool of willing vendors, if you will, that we could go to.
Yeah, I mean, it should be pretty straightforward. You know, the money's there, you know the work that needs to be done. You contact
Yeah.
him, he could have it bid
Right,
out.
right, and maybe take Sabrina out of the middle of being the one that
Right,
has to
exactly.
line up.
Yeah, I just think
Yeah.
that she can't,
Yeah.
she can't actually
Yes.
commit the town to
Right,
spending
no,
resources
exactly.
legally.
Right, right, exactly.
Well, a few things. Part of this has been fraught with a lot of misunderstandings, but in terms of the first item, which was acknowledgement of, now, I don't know what happened after April of 16, but except that there is a letter that went out to everyone who donated more than $250 or more, and it was first written by Larry Barton, and then it was updated with Carrie Coburn, and she was the one, she created the letter, and that went out to everyone. And I did that for 10 years, and we never had a problem with acknowledging people. I wrote a thank you note to every single person, so I don't really know what that was you were talking about.
No, I think that's more so just to make sure that we're fulfilling our obligation.
Right, I wasn't suggesting
Yeah,
what
we're
we
doing
weren't
that.
doing, I was just making sure that.
Yeah, we just didn't know.
Yeah.
We don't know if it's
That we
happening. and
recognize
should.
it as an issue that we need to deal with.
And it shouldn't depend upon the size of it, whether it's over 250 or not.
That's the IRS code, it's road.
Oh, okay.
It says so, and I'm sorry I don't have it with me, but I can provide it.
Yeah.
It says, within this section 115 of the IRS code, that's what they stipulate. But there's people who donate less, of course, can still do take it as tax deduction.
Yeah, you can still write it
Oh,
off.
they
It's
can still
probably
write
you
it
just
off.
don't get the,
But they should still
They
get.
don't need the paper for the IRS.
yeah.
Okay.
They may need documentation for the accounting on their own income tax, but
Right,
And,
yeah.
and the checks that they donate are written to Town of Carlisle?
all of them.
For the benefit
There's a
of
Center Park
the
gift
Center
fund,
Park gift
yeah,
fund.
yeah. That's where they go.
And Larry Barton said that if people wanted to designate, for example, for maintenance, because the maintenance of the park, which you can see now, is the main activity, the main responsibility for the park, for the town, for the park to exist. So I'm glad that wasn't an issue. The other point was, I don't understand about I was entrusted with being a coordinator for the park, and as far as I know, during my tenure time, we always had money, and the one time there wasn't money for someone, it was because of a deposit was required. Well, the town doesn't do that, so that request was rewritten, and I don't know, here again, there have been some allegations and what have you that that are not relevant to what didn't happen as far as I'm concerned. Our books, all of my records, all of my spending went through the Selectmen, through Priscilla to pay it, and then before that, they went to Margaret, and she provided the list and all that. So I remember one time when we were 50 cents short, but I just don't know.
Don't worry about
I mean,
50 Yeah, no,
so I think this whole business of being, everything, and also I have copies of all the deposits and who gave what and when the thank you notes went and all those people also up until October last fall, when the committee decided to change the fund, didn't want me to fundraise any longer for them. So from that time on, I don't know exactly who gave what or when or how it happened, because they didn't give it to me. I mean, and elected not to. But still, all those other people are listed on the Friends page of the Carlisle's website. And we do have a website. I mean, the park has a website that was created when the park was formed. It was planted in '07. And Julie Turner of Bedford, she created the website. She wrote text for it. She did pictures for it. And she guarded the name for the park that goes through, what is it, WordPress, not WordPress? Something like, no, that's not the right word. Word something. It's there. You can go to it, and there's also the history, the pictures of what the park looked like. Maybe you've already seen all this, but it's all documented over the 10 years of what, of the existence of that website. And the other website that the park has is through the Carlisle.org, which is all the committees. Maybe you've seen that too. In Carlisle, it doesn't have the same, it has a picture on it. And I called Ed Fields to know, because I didn't know what was all on it. And he said there's that gorgeous picture there with the daffodils that is on that page, with the daffodils in the vinca bed by the fence. And he has a note at the very top of it referred to Carlisle. Here's the reference to Center Park's website, and it's carlislecenterpark.org. So that is a clarification of that. And you probably know that there's been talk about Carlisle, the park needs a website. And then the other thing that comes to mind is, at the moment, there are plants that are suffering because there were certain jobs that John Bakewell had for insect control and all that. There is some of those things came through the town. Now, I don't know if that was a problem, but John Bakewell's invoices.
No, I know, yeah. We did.
And we came through a different fund than the Center Park.
Yeah, I mean, I think Gary paid for some of them, I think, actually. Through DPW. I'm happy to work with you on all of this, you know, I'm happy to work with you on all this. I just don't, I don't know if we want to.
No, I was going to actually interrupt you shortly to ask you, you've heard Kerry's presentation, and he said he has had discussions with you. Do you have any objections to what he was proposing as option number 2, where we went back to business as was, and you more or less are back in the saddle?
But this would be very temporary, because I fully expected. I was so happy. I gave away my shovels and my rake and my all that stuff. So I really did not. But I'm willing to. I feel a responsibility because of the way the park was started, and we said we would do it. So I would like to do this, be over it quickly. But the one thing that Carrie didn't mention was that. The notion that there be a look for a person who would be a manager. Someone has been, it doesn't have to be a gardener or not, who is a manager, and so that professional people could come back. Tim Malone, Maria Greenlawn, those five people, the police, we share some expenses with the police. And that all worked like a charm, because those people are professionals. Tim Malone's been there for a gardener. He knows every bug and water, what things need. The water got turned on in August. We turned our 10 years, turned it on in May. So just that's all the staff that is required. And it was less expensive than having with people who aren't so experienced.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we tried to go with the committee, and that obviously didn't work. You know, which is, it's disappointing, because I think that was the hope that would be kind of the long-term plan.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so, I mean, ultimately, you know, a 1 year, you know, again, maybe kind of do-over to try to figure out.
Or less,
you know,
less.
Or even less. Well, I'm hoping that for a year. You know, to give us time to figure out, you know, exactly what we want to do. I mean, again, yeah, I don't think we should necessarily hash out all the details tonight, but if we can at least, you know, have some sort of plan moving forward so the park gets maintained, you know, and hopefully at the level that it has been maintained, I think that'd be a good way to go. You know, we'll make sure all our ducks in a row in terms of nonprofit reporting and all of that. You know, and I guess it's been done in the past, so, you know, Priscilla knows what to do. Tim's certainly on board. You know, but then in the meantime, we kind of figure out, you know, since the committee didn't work, you know, we really have to figure out a long-term plan for this.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's, you know, it's gotta be, you know, a tight process as far as what documentation we're keeping and all that, since I think we are the nonprofit, right? Since we're accepting the money, Tim. So, you know, we need to have the receipts, we need to have everything.
You have them.
Yeah, I'm just, and so, but I'm not so sure about, you know, like, I didn't realize that there was another step that we were gonna have to take. I mean, the committee didn't work.
Right.
I think that Carrie's already outlined what the long-term options are. What else?
Well, no,
might
but if we,
do?
right, but if we go with this option, it's clearly not a long-term option. This would be a stopgag until we figured out.
But our other options are the other three that are already before us.
Yeah, at the moment, I mean, unless something else, you know, I mean, because there's been talk about possibly the garden club, or, there's another thing that was tossed out, but I think the garden club was, you know.
The issue is fundraising, because the town doesn't want to spend the money.
Right.
So we need some mechanism, and that's why we thought the committee would do the fundraising, and I'm not quite sure why they now didn't get off the ground with that.
Because none of them had experience with fundraising, and that's why they asked me to help them. And I didn't know that when I.
Oh, okay, well.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, you know, I think the Friends of Center Park would be, you know, if we do want to maintain it at the level that it's being maintained, you know, that would probably be the way that we'd have to go, because you'd need to raise enough funds.
Right.
So you could hire the professionals to do the work. You know, I mean, while Gary's crew is talented, there's limitations to what, you know, they can do and will do, you know, no matter how much money's in their budget. So, you know, I think if we do want to maintain it at that level, we would have to try to determine if there was some sort of interest in, you know, people joining Friends of Center Park, you know.
And then that requires a board and a committee.
Exactly,
and
right,
you know,
right.
everything that we had before.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really just a different name for a committee.
For a committee, exactly.
It is, but I believe it becomes private, so it's not
It does,
subject
yeah.
to open meeting rules and,
Yeah, but I think, yeah.
And quorums.
But it's still gonna be hard to get people interested.
Right, it probably will be,
I
right.
understand, but
Okay.
it might be easier to operate.
Right, yeah.
Excuse me, the things, it would seem to me that, Gary made no comment on this, but that it would be easy just to go back to what worked for 10 years, namely the few professionals there, and I mentioned, Carrie didn't mention, but I have a friend who is pledging $4,000 so that starting this week, we could have, if I get a job, that to start cleaning it up, taking care of the insects, taking care of, I don't know what's going to happen with the holly bushes, because the deer didn't get their dose of whatever they get, and all the leaves are gone except for the bottom branches of 6 bushes. So there are those things that those professionals can take care of, and it was easy. I mean, I had business experience, and so that's all I did was, and everything though was not whimsical, but it was approved came through the Selectmen's office and then through the vote and through you, right?
Mm-hmm.
You saw them too, and then also then Priscilla, she saw it too to make sure that everything got paid. And everything, as far as I know, got paid, except until I was involved.
Yeah, no, I mean,
that's what I would do.
Right, no, I mean, ultimately, I think that's great, it's, but like you said, you don't want to do this long-term.
No,
And-
we'll do
right.
it fast.
Yeah, and ultimately, I don't think, I mean, and I could be wrong, but like, I don't think the town is gonna be willing to spend, to the level at which you've spent over the past few years, so it's not just gonna roll into the town, and the town's gonna spend $20-some-odd thousand a year to maintain it. So really, the only way that I see, and I could be wrong, I mean, and others can chime in, but the only way that I see the park going forward at the level that it is at now is through private fundraising, or, either you doing it, or Friends of Center Park, or some other mechanism to get additional funds in. So.
Well, see, the Friends of Center Park exists, so in that collaboration, the way that when we were founded. So I have an email for all of those, and the first thing that fundraising would do would be to go back to those people. And there's a whole list of them in that far corner on that board, people who were the first donors, and so we raised $87,000, and we spent it for good quality and good. And the other thing,
I think the difference, Sabrina, the difference is that the Friends is a group of people who have expressed an interest in and supported the park over the last 10 years. A corporation, not-for-profit corporation called the Friends of Center Park would be the optimal way of providing that support, and it does not exist today. There are Friends of the Park, but there is no corporation that's a not-for-profit corporation that is set up to do that in a way that's independent of the town and effective. So that's the discussion that we need to, and that's certainly, we know it works. That model works going forward, and it's probably a more permanent solution.
A non-profit corporation.
Permanent solution, but.
then how would the town deal with an entity that
The same way
is
we do.
independent?
We do the same, we have a Friends of the Council of Aging, and we have a Friends of the Library, and we would deal with it in the same way that we deal with those 2 other corporations.
Right, so ultimately what happens is people make a donation to, say, the library, for example, and the Friends of Gleason Public Library has a board, and ultimately that board would make decisions as to, how they want to spend the money, and then it gets procured through, it goes through you, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, and then it gets procured and approved through Tim, and then they make the purchases. So it's the same sort of thing. It's just instead of falling on one person, it falls on a board, and it's more so just really just a better process for the way the town handles when funds come in.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot more work though, no? For the town to take on for the entity which is so different from what these people
Not really,
do.
and it's
No.
really what we were, I think, I wasn't on
Yeah,
the
hope-
board when that happened, but I think that's what we thought the committee was going to do.
I think
It
that
was
was the
going to
hope.
basically be the kernel of the Friends Committee that would then do all that work.
But setting up a 501(c) is not, it's not trivial, from what I understand, like the Old Home Day is one of these. and my next door neighbor, across the street neighbor, set it up. And from listening to him talk, it was, it's a bunch of work. You gotta fill out an application, you gotta create a charter, and, and then you have to have a board, and you have to have meetings, and,
Absolutely.
and so the town isn't gonna do that.
No.
It's not gonna be like, oh, well, we'll create one for you, we'll gin it up,
No.
So somebody out there would have to do all that work, would have to be motivated enough to, put that together.
Right. Yeah.
It's not like we're gonna tell town council, oh, okay, create one for us,
Right. Right.
So the question is, who is that?
Right. Right, well, I mean, that's just it. If, I would think that you would have to see if there's interest in it, right? If there were people who actually wanted to be on the board.
I mean, to me, I've seen this go on for a long time, and what I think is lacking is like interest.
Yeah.
And
That's
slash
right.
commitment, I mean, it just doesn't seem to be there.
Right.
And we keep pretending that, okay, well, it's out there, but we just haven't kind of found it yet. We haven't tapped into it, but in spite of quite a bit of effort. So I'm wondering,
When
what's different now than before?
Maybe Friends of the Library will take it on.
I doubt it. Okay, so in general then, what do people support for this year moving forward? Do people want to support, as Gary did, number 2? Do people want to just support DPW maintaining it? And not going down the, I think we're at a point now where, it's just become this thing that pops up year after year after year, so it needs to be resolved.
Yeah, this doesn't resolve it, but,
Option number 2 wouldn't resolve it, option
Right.
number 1 probably would.
Oh, you have no idea what the amount of damage they've already done to the park. I mean, have you seen the park lately?
I haven't looked at it recently, but
it's
ultimately though,
heartbreaking.
we need to figure out a long-term solution, and if it's gonna be DPW maintaining it, then, that would be the decision that this board would have to make. And I think, part of the trade-off would be that it obviously wouldn't be at the same level
It would-
that it is now, so.
They're plowing their snow into the bushes and knocking over the irrigation heads. I mean, and not doing anything with the surface of the park. And I don't want that mentioned in the paper that I said that. please.
Yeah, no, but that's
No,
the thing,
I'm
so.
serious. That's very important. I don't want to badmouth DPW. Because I have worked with them for 10 years.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I think, we would have to sit down with Gary and figure out exactly what his crew could do.
I think the question is, do we want to go one more year?
Right, that's exactly what the question is.
And then we're gonna have
And
to
then we're
decide.
back to, we won't, it doesn't give us forward progress.
No, it just gives
No.
us one more
Just-
summer of a nice park.
Right, right. But I mean, I would think that the hope would be, okay, we can see how things go. Ultimately, we should know over the next few months if there is interest in people becoming Friends of Central Park. If not, then,
Actually, you almost might see if you got interest if you do it the other way around,
yeah.
faster.
Faster, right, you could do that as well, yeah.
Well, the park needs spring cleanup immediately. The picture in the center shows it where it was April of last year with
Yeah.
little spruce things coming up, and they're coming up now. And
Right, but I mean, ultimately, if we're not gonna maintain it at that level, then, Gary's crew would have to do it when they could do it, I mean, it would be, so, I guess, do we wanna just cut the cord and?
Well,
and Gary's
it's a
crew
question of
do it, or-
when do you cut the cord?
Right,
And
well,
you could
that's
say,
just it,
so you could say, okay, another year, and then it's option 4, and if a 501(c) doesn't exist within a
Right,
year,
yeah, maybe
Okay.
that's-
then
right.
we go to
That's what we
option
said.
1, or whatever the Gary option,
Right, yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So-
I think we do, yeah, we need to
And
put-
then I think
Yeah,
we've
some
been
sort of-
we've been very accommodating,
Yeah.
we've bent over backwards,
Yeah.
the town contributed $6,000,
Right.
This isn't free to have Tim as a procurement officer, I mean, there's work involved there, so, another year, and then I think we have to say, well, look, if
Right.
this 501(c) didn't show up,
Right. Right, there isn't any.
probably not gonna
It's
materialize.
not gonna just materialize on its own,
Right.
though.
Right.
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 And it's not up to us. It's not our job to make it happen.
No.
Right. We appreciate the standard that you have.
Yeah.
No, it's-
However, we can't maintain that standard.
Right.
So if you can find some people that you would be happy giving control to,
I'm not,
that would retain that standard,
Right.
we'd be happy to accept them. But we can't do what you,
excuse me, I'm thinking, and I've talked with other people about this who've been in, and just one person, like I did, is a coordinator, and working with professionals. There, you only need a few of them, and especially when you get people like Tim.
Right, but you have to pay the professionals is the issue, and the town's
you-
not gonna pay
But,
$25,000 to maintain Center Park.
Well, I-
Because you also need this person who's doing the
And
fundraising, because the
right,
town isn't gonna
exactly.
spend the money to
Right.
maintain the
oh,
park.
I understand, and this is why I'm really willing to give it a, I would think, I would know something, we would know some, the first thing is to use the money that I have to, get the park cleaned up right now. I mean, it just looks awful, and it needs.
understand that, but we want you to be looking at the job that we need to be done.
Right.
And the job we need to have done is to get a corporation or some entity that can raise the money and hire a manager if necessary to do, and then to delegate to the professionals to keep the park up. We cannot do that.
Yeah, so I think just to maybe be putting words in your mouth, if we do this for another summer, we're gonna be in the exact same situation if somebody has not found somebody
Right.
who is willing to take it on to replace
Right.
you. Because we have been unable to find anybody who is willing to do that.
Right.
So.
Well, in terms of a committee, have you looked for just one person like Tim,
Well, no, we haven't,
Harry,
but
and
you
I?
could. You know,
Oh, I
if you
intend
know,
to.
if
I
you know,
intend
if you
to.
know somebody
I
that
do.
would work, I
I
think
do.
what we're saying is, we haven't been able to
Right,
find
we haven't been
anybody.
able to do that.
If we
Yeah.
do this for one more summer, to maintain the park, what will have made that the right decision is if you can find somebody that you feel that you can trust, that you can pass the baton on to,
Right.
and we can continue doing this.
Right.
Right, because-
Otherwise, next spring, we're gonna be saying, it's Gary.
Right. Right.
So we have 1 year to find somebody, but we're not gonna be looking for them.
We're not gonna be, right.
No, and I also met with Annette and John Lee. We were talking about that in terms of a management person, that, that's all that I did. And it was beautiful for 10 years.
But you're able to get funds. I mean,
Right.
We didn't, the town didn't give us funds. We
No, I
raised-
understand that. You,
understand.
right,
But
you
this
were
is
able
why
to,
we- well,
you
see,
were
I
able to
didn't-
contact people and get money. And
Right.
and
And I
we're
want-
not gonna do that, and we're not gonna find somebody who,
Town's
we
not
haven't
in a
been able.
position to do that.
Right.
I know, but this would be part of my job, to work with the profession. We never could have raised $70,000 in 7 months if we hadn't been, no matter how awful it looked, as a parking lot, if we hadn't had a professional fundraiser. They just,
Right, so I think.
it's fun to work with them, and I just think it can be done, because it's a whole town, all those people support the idea of the park.
Right, so I think at least what I'm saying is that, if we do this for one more summer,
Mhm.
you're saying that you want it to be temporary.
I do.
Then you need to find the person who's gonna be able to do
Yep.
the fundraising and the management after you decide you don't wanna do it anymore. Or it's just really, our only choice is gonna be to hand it over to
Right.
DPW.
Right.
Because we have been unsuccessful.
Our attempt at doing that was a failure.
Right.
So we're at the point of giving that up.
Right.
So if you want to bail us out and get us the team that we
Right.
need, we are open and flexible to accept it. We just cannot get that team ourselves.
Well, it's easy if we can go back to the professionals that we had and pay their bill. And they're not that expensive, because the park is all planted. Now we have to do replacement plants because of the roles. But,
And so all that you would be working out with Tim,
Right.
based upon the amount of
Right.
available funds
Exactly.
that
Yep.
we have.
Right.
And so, I guess
But you're
I'll
s-
say that I'm supportive of option 2
Mhm.
for 1 more year.
Yep.
As long as it's going through Tim.
Right.
And just with the understanding, Sabrina, that if we don't have somebody to replace you after the temporary time, and you need to find those people, because we haven't been able to, whether it's fundraising people or an individual, whatever you think is the right thing, and the committed person who is willing to carry the baton from you. If we don't have that, it's gonna go it's gonna go to DPW next spring.
Right.
Well, don't vote for that one.
So,
That
So
part
we
of
need
it,
a
I mean.
motion now? Or
yeah, do we have to make a motion, or can we
Yes, we
just?
do. I want to plan, we
You're
have to
gonna-
do the garden.
Yeah, maybe just have it on the record that
Okay.
at this point in time, you support option number 2, but
Okay.
I move that,
revisit it in the spring.
we.
Oh, sorry.
sorry.
Well, you can make the motion, or do you mind if I?
No, go
Okay,
ahead.
you can.
I haven't
Do you wanna?
started.
Okay, why don't you?
Yeah, please identify yourself.
There's no mic there.
There's
Yeah.
no mic there.
Bill Risso, 155 Bullfrog Road. The only suggestion I would make is that if you're gonna make a motion tonight, that you put in a deadline on it, so something happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
In other words, it will be transferred to DPW if a committee or if I isn't informed, so that we're not spending valuable resource time from the selectmen on this again next year.
No,
Oh,
Amen.
Okay, so I would say the deadline is December 31st, because it should be pretty dormant by then.
okay. So I move that, we give, Sabrina the authority to raise money, and Tim, that she would continue to work through Tim for the authority to spend it, for
Until
until
December
December
31st.
31st, 2018, at which time, if there is no Friends of a corporation,
Or somebody else to
or
manage it.
something else, somebody else to manage, the park will be maintained in future by the DPW.
going to be considered to be maintained by the DPW. 'cause
No, if there's
No,
nobody to
it
manage
will be
it,
maintained
if there's
by
nobody to
DPW.
manage it, if you don't find anybody to manage it, it's going to DPW.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
just at that point now.
Okay, well, that will be a strong fundraising point.
Good.
Okay?
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? No? Oscar Lilo, aye?
Kissinger, aye.
Reed, aye.
Brown eye?
Von Roskin, aye.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Thank you.
Good luck.
Yes, and you didn't say that I couldn't go back to the professionals that we have.
No, yeah, you
Okay.
can, so yeah, just work with Tim.
We just said you
Your
work
part?
for Tim on that, that's gonna be,
Yes, I worked with him.
December
yeah,
31st, and
you're
then
working with
that
Tim.
will be very easy.
It's all based upon available funds.
Yep,
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
all right, we'll have a meeting, yeah, we'll talk about it.
Thank you. Thank you all. I
you.
appreciate it. Thank you, Carrie Kissinger.
Nice of you to finally join us, Wayne.
Way to drive people away,
Yeah, we've
Luke.
only had about 72 of these meetings. Want to join us at the table, or have I offended you enough where you won't come up?
Talk about to listen to you, talk about CCTV.
No, we're done with
Oh,
that.
it's done? Okay.
Yeah, we're right on
It was
schedule.
8:30.
It's on YouTube,
He
you
knew
can
you wanted to
rewind.
talk about it, so he
Okay.
took it early.
I figured you were
I'm not-
watching it on TV, and that's why you came early.
No,
Wow, they're ahead of schedule.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. You don't watch it? I know David was watching us before. Really? Oh, who's winning? Here I am.
5-1 Sox.
Oh, good. All right.
Okay,
So welcome.
thank you.
I know, having a good season. Still early though. So should we just let you roll? Or-
Tim, what do we need to talk about?
Well, the warrant has been posted, has gone to print. Wayne did have input over the past few months as far as some of the articles and some of the ordering of the warrant. And he's been kept up to speed with what's on there and what isn't, and we're hoping for a one-nighter, but you never know. With
I think we're good.
anytime you bring animals into the equation, things can go.
Well, we're only bringing dogs. so no
Dogs.
beer.
Yeah.
Everyone likes dogs, right?
I was hoping for the trifecta of dogs, deer, and marijuana.
Yeah,
Oh, mosquito control, that's what we need.
I know, we haven't had one of those in a while.
So you already provided input on the
Yeah,
order
Tim-
of these things?
Tim and I have been in pretty constant contact. I mean, well, regular, I should say. It hasn't been all that intense because it's a relatively quiet year, but we've been back and forth, and I appreciate it. I had suggested that we not stay locked into the same precise order and just think about, mixing things up so that the pacing is a little bit different, and so that's why the dog thing, at number 14 or whatever it's at is that's at relatively early for Carlisle for taking up something that's not in the usual course of things.
So
hopefully
if
that will help us get a quorum quickly.
Right, but do you have any concern about us not getting through this in one night?
No.
Okay.
No, and the mosquito can haunt the moderators, predicting with good cooperation, even when we will finish it.
We like to hear.
Okay.
I do have Tim's comment about when we put animals in.
Not bad.
But
No,
no,
I want to talk about the operating budget maybe, because we do,
Yeah.
we know of a proposed amount. Hey, Charlene.
So have you been spoken to about the,
Oh, I've been spoken to.
and what are your thoughts?
Yes, so, the Housing Authority, broke some kind of record in a positive way of having an amendment drafted before the warrant was even finalized, which actually, I mean, it's perfectly fine, because it, sort of helps us manage the process, and I appreciate that. And they, checked with me, they checked with town council on appropriate form, they spoke with Tim, and they suggested some language, town council had some suggestions, I had some suggestions. My position on things like this, I don't, it's not my role to say whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, I just want to help make sure that whatever the idea is, help them get it in proper form so that we can have a legitimate debate on the merits and not have someone tripped up on just because it's done in the incorrect form and so forth. So I think we had an earlier, so the wording of that is passing around, and the motion should be in appropriate form by the time we get to the floor. And then we're talking about the amendment on the budget. And then I hadn't yet thought about, appropriate timing, but I'd spoken with Steve Perlman that, when someone is considerate enough to, come in advance and say, look, I want to plan an amendment, we'll figure out when is the appropriate time for him to offer that. Do we want to work, give people a chance to say whether they have holds on anything else, take them up, or do we take this up first? We'll see. So that's the intention of that one.
Yeah.
I guess.
So it comes as a form of a hold to start with.
Yes, it would to begin with.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see
And
why.
actually, general government, and I mean, logically, actually, I should probably correct myself. Logically, general government is the first one up anyway, and that's where their amendment would fall. So it would come up. The logical place would be for it to be immediately after, we've heard the FinCom presentation and the votes of any town boards and committees.
I mean, but, so you would just do it,
Yeah.
so typically when you're going through this, you just say you're gonna read it off and you want somebody to say hold, right?
Correct. Yes.
And so you would just do that, and then they would say hold.
They'll say hold, I'll say, I'll say.
I would say don't, I mean, I wouldn't treat them treat it any differently than anybody else putting a hold.
No, I'm not.
Yeah.
No, certainly not. all I'm saying is that because the amendment will come to the general government line, which, you know, as luck of the draw would have it, that's the top of the list. So that means it will be the first one that comes up.
Which article is that?
It's Article 11, so,
I hadn't gotten that far.
so it
Okay.
actually starts the bottom of page 5. I'm looking at the warrant booklet. I'm
Yeah,
not
I've
sure
got
what
it.
you-
Yeah, so ultimately you say if we're willing to accept the consent agenda, and then you go, are there any holds on Article 2, Article 3, Article 4? Is that how you do it?
The budget
Remember
operates
correctly?
similarly, but it's separate from the consent agenda.
Oh, okay. Oh, it is.
Yeah,
okay.
so he
It's
he
not
reads
the
through each
consent.
one of these,
Oh,
and
the
they would
consent's
need,
just one through eight.
they would
Right.
need to say, hold on general government.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
right. I mean, there might be somebody who,
Yeah.
you know, that wanted to hold on the fireboat or something.
Yeah.
They would,
Right.
they would, that
Oh,
would be
so,
under
yeah.
protection of personal
Um,
property.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
we're
so-
not- We're not gonna have it.
So do
They
you
want us to
recall
have a
this ever
fireboat.
happening in the past, an amendment to the operating budget?
I do recall an amendment early in my attendance at town meetings as a Carlisle resident, probably 20 years ago. I can't recall how it was handled.
Yeah, that's because Anna Thompson doesn't live in Carlisle, she lives in Concord, and every year, every year.
It's always on.
So,
So,
I actually remember who made the proposal and what it was about and so forth, but I won't go into that.
so I guess then the next question is, will they be given the opportunity to present?
Yes, and you know, the normal is that for people making, you know, proposing an amendment from the floor, you know, in most cases, it's the same rules, anyone speaking from the floor, 3 minutes. Given the sort of complexity and history of the issue and that they're coming in advance, I said they could have 5, which I think was reasonable under the circumstances.
Yeah, and then, I mean, ultimately, so, we're gonna discuss this under Tim's Town Administrator Report, you know, and there's some material that was provided, David's here to talk about it as well, is that, you know, we've had this subcommittee, that has a proposal. So we'd like to basically offer up that counter proposal or the
Well, it's in the
rebuttal.
budget. It's in the budget.
Yeah,
Our
yeah.
proposal is in the budget.
Right.
explanation then.
Right, an explanation of how it's.
Right.
Right. So, would we have the opportunity to do that, or,
Yes.
all right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
basically what happens, once an amendment is live on the floor, then it defers discussion on the main motion, and all the same rules that we'd have on discussion of the main motion, that we'd have here.
Mhm.
So, yeah, you know, whether the selectmen are the appropriate to respond, or FinCom, your choice.
Or the subcommittee, or FinCom, or, yeah, I mean, I think we have to exactly figure that out, but, yeah, my guess it would probably be the subcommittee. Right, or at least representation from
Yeah,
the subcommittee.
or the Board of Selectmen
Or the Board of Selectmen.
representation to that committee.
Right, yeah.
I think
Meaning
that
Nathan.
the Board of Selectmen have to take a position on
Yeah.
this, and as does FinCom, I presume,
Yeah.
and I think Affordable Housing
The
Trust
trust
needs
should as
to. I
well,
think,
yeah.
Carrie, we need to get together and, prior to town meeting, and take a position on the current proposal and budget, and knowing that there is an amendment, I guess we should take a position on that. Is there any way we could see what the amendment is? Have they written it?
Yes.
Yeah, it basically is they had $34,000 to general expense in town hall to hire hardback, a housing coordinator at 18.75 hours, if I remember correctly.
And that 34,000 is supposed to
It's
take
net-
care of.
It's net of what it was in there for our HSO.
Does it include funds for, like, benefits and all that?
No, 'cause it'd be non-benefited now.
It'd be
Yeah,
Okay.
so they drop.
under the 20 hours, so it, just under 19 hours.
Okay.
So it's a salary cost of,
Like
yeah.
$43,000 or something like that?
yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we absolutely would like to have an opportunity to at least make a statement after the amendment.
Yeah, that's fine.
Well, we could probably even put a presentation together, right? A 3 or 5 minute PowerPoint. Well, just to go through, like some of the tables or some of the details. I mean, we can discuss them more.
Yeah.
But I'm just asking the question now that Wayne's here, because I wouldn't want to show up with a PowerPoint and have him say no, so.
Well, you have to get to them in advance anyway.
Yeah, no, I know, exactly. 3 days in advance.
I generally discourage use of PowerPoints, especially in opposition or response to something. But, if it is necessary and useful to put up a chart, for example, that shows how money is moving or something like that, I'm not going to say no. My big thing, which I beat up on people all the time, and it's in my notes to presenters, is, I don't want bullets that just summarize what people are saying.
Right, yeah.
Use the graphic medium for its purpose.
Right. Yep.
Okay. Well, we can talk about it later. I
Yeah.
was just thinking it was a statement.
Okay.
I think a statement's more appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a frustrating experience. I mean,
Yeah.
it's, we've been through the process, and they agreed to be a part of a group, and then started that whole discussion saying, we've already decided to go to town meeting, and this was back in December. And so now they're going to town meeting and bypassing the whole process just because they decided way back when that that's what they wanted to do and they didn't want to collaborate.
Right. Yeah.
It's just incredibly frustrating.
It is.
So I think it's.
We can discuss that more a little later, but yeah.
That should be under another topic.
Yeah,
Well,
we'll do it
it's-
under.
but it's part of this.
Yeah, no,
I
it's true, but,
I know,
yeah.
but we gotta talk about our facility meeting at that
Yeah.
point, so it's
Yeah.
not the time.
It's a valid point.
So, other than that, I'm not aware, I don't know if the clerk has heard any rumblings of anything interesting going to happen? But, well,
Do we know what's going on with the $1 million?
Hmm?
I'm sorry. Do we know what's going on with the $1 million?
the school,
Yeah.
I do not.
Did they vote last night?
We heard a rumor that it wasn't moved, but we haven't confirmed that yet.
Oh, good.
So if it wasn't moved, then we don't have to move it either.
Oh, good.
They're saying
They
it was
conquered-
Concord last night?
Yeah, the regional school district's capital project,
Mhm.
that they were attempting to change the scale of it, or.
Yeah, it was
And
all.
then
messed
They
up.
didn't realize you
it was only
couldn't-
Paving and lighting.
Yeah,
and
they didn't,
They
yeah.
couldn't put 2 parking, and so it
Yeah,
got
yeah,
complicated.
that was a mess.
It's- Yeah,
Good.
some changes that were out of scope, so I think maybe they didn't move it, so,
That's at the end.
but, yeah, it's the last one.
Oh, cross that right off.
Yeah, well, we're saving the best for last, you
Yeah.
know?
We'll have that ballot question regardless, because
Yeah, it's already printed.
it's, being printed, so
There.
it may be fairly meaningless, but
Good.
I don't think, I'm trying to think what else is.
Okay.
Well, yeah, it's not final.
I know.
But do you, sorry, do you have anything else for us? Or no?
No, I mean, this was just a general check-in.
Okay.
I'm sorry I wasn't able to.
When we needed you.
Right, exactly, yeah.
What did you need me for?
No, we didn't, yeah.
just your calming support.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's nothing in CPA, I'm sorry.
No, the CPA thing.
CPA is a small,
No, I think they'll do that 2 weeks from
two
tonight.
projects than usual.
The speed limit
two
ones might
projects,
take a little while.
Oh, the speed limit, right.
Yeah, I don't know if that will.
But this is just authorizing us to be able to set the speed limit. It is not actually
Right.
Yeah.
enforcing any speed limit changes.
Yeah, but I suspect that there's gonna be a lot of people coming out, because I mean, everybody that asks me about, what about this 25?
Yeah, well, so,
So there's a lot of misunderstanding about it.
yeah, and I mean, I think that's one of the things and we don't have to do it tonight, we can do it next week, is we need to determine who's gonna basically move which articles. And, you know, I think some of them, like that speed limit thing, you know, maybe we just have a couple of slides actually detailing exactly what it is and what it.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, but
I
it's-
think
but-
what we don't want to do is show where the speed limits might change.
No, right.
I mean,
but-
because, you know, I think
But
that
I know
the
you don't
highlight
like
here is,
slides.
the highlight here is just as you're reading it, just saying, hey, the passage of this article would not change any current speed limits.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah, it's just, I can see this going down a rabbit hole. though.
That's why, yes.
Yeah.
I'm getting more calls about this than just about anything.
About speed
I bet
limit?
you are,
Yeah,
yeah.
I know, I just, so, I think it's gonna be important for somebody to be able to fend off that.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm understanding you correctly, if you stand up and say, look, this doesn't change any speed limit, so if you're worried or in favor of a speed limit change on your particular street, that fight, you're invited to come back to the selectmen at the time it comes, and
Right.
we'll welcome you. And I think if you say that, then
Yeah, It
Yeah.
only
most people-
allows
Yeah.
us to come back to town meeting with proposed speed limit changes. That's what it does.
So they still,
No.
you would still have to come back, or the selectmen can
We
decide?
don't
No,
have to
it-
go
No,
back
I
to
guess we
town
don't
meeting.
have to go back.
But what
Oh,
we're
well,
saying
then-
here is that the board will not make any changes to current speed limits without a public hearing.
Yeah, okay, so it's like the deer regs in a way. And a lot of people thought the deer regs had to go back to the town meeting, and they didn't. And so this is another one that doesn't have to go back then, what you were saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's not point that out. Okay.
But we give
So
the opportunity
you still
for
have to
public
be
input
careful
before
with
any
the
change.
presentation to make sure people
Yeah.
Yeah.
aren't misled.
Very nice.
Yep. I'll do that one.
Good.
Yeah.
Any other concerns?
I don't think so.
Ballots are ready, in case anybody needs an absentee. So just contact my office. They're available until noon on Monday, thank you.
And
For absentee ballots.
Oh, okay.
And you have to fill out a new application every year, so.
Hmm.
If you've been getting absentee ballots for every year, every election, you should have filled out a new application in January. So you can call and make sure there's an application already if you think it's been sent.
And there are,
Emailing them out this week for any that I already have, the applications, which is not many.
okay.
Oh.
And it looks like there aren't going to be any ballot questions.
Well, the one
Well,
is
the
gonna
one
be
Yeah,
on
but-
there.
on there,
The
but it
school,
won't be.
yeah.
Yeah, but,
But if it's not
Count.
moved, then there
Right.
won't be a ballot question
Right.
for that.
It'll be on the
Yes,
ballot.
it'll be
You
on
just-
there, but it
won't
won't
be
have to
counted
be-
the night we tally the results.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, I missed the CCTV. So how has the YouTube streaming been going? And
We're streaming right now.
we're streaming now, and is that a possibility that we should look into for town meeting?
Well, I would like to do it for town meeting, but we don't have
We don't have
any
the bandwidth.
hardware.
Yeah,
We need a piece of hardware, which would cost like $700-ish, and then we could do it. We have hardware over there, but it's tied into that whole cabinet, you know, it's not movable. So, you know.
But you can't vote from home and.
Right.
So, and we sometimes have a little problem with quorum. So, you know, I think it's a double-edged sword if people watch it from home and they're not in the audience.
Well, last year we broadcast it live, but it was only well, I guess it was live on the web on the CCTV website as well as on the channel. Channel 9.
Not town meeting.
Yeah.
99?
Yeah.
Oh, 99.
We did town meeting last year.
The special the special, yes.
Special town meeting,
Right,
yes,
yeah.
yes. Right. Not, yeah, so that was 6 months ago. So we can do that, like we did last time, but if we want to do YouTube as well, we need like $700 and a little box, you know, to buy a little box. That would make that happen.
Well, that's something that I think would be worth looking into, if not this year, for next year. And, you know, because obviously, if we're going to do it, we need to make people aware of it. And
We could take a vote at town meeting to see how many people would like it.
Well, they won't, because they'll all be at town meeting. They're the people that actually show up.
Yeah.
They'll be watching it on their
We
phone.
want to keep encouraging that.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah, no,
exactly.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, actually, I think I mean, it's not exactly scientific, but the feedback generally around the Massachusetts Moderators Association is that live broadcasting actually doesn't hurt, you know, attendance, that actually.
People find out what actually happens.
Yeah,
behind this and really important,
right,
that they
yeah,
should have gone.
Actually, by making it easier for people to engage and understand what's going on with town government, they may actually, over time, develop more of an interest in actually showing up.
Last year at the debrief, you talked about changing quorum. Do you have any thought about? About 0, we talked about.
You know, I think that would be, you know, interesting to think about. I don't feel like we particularly have a problem right now that needs to be fixed. I guess I would say, and maybe it's easier for me to say this, you know, my personal opinion, the discussions about changing town clerk from you know, elected to appointed struck me that regardless of the merits of that, I was thinking about it and saying, well, you know, it's been quite some time, 15 years or so, since we had a wholesale review of how town government is organized, where we went from 3 to 5 on the Selectmen and a bunch of other changes. And I was kind of wondering, well, why would you pick off town clerk as a one-off? Perhaps there are a whole series of things that we ought to be looking at. You know, for moderator, I would say it's kind of silly to have it as a one-year term. I would say go to a 3-year term. Maybe I'll check out earlier then. But there may be a whole variety of things. Yeah, 6 months. And then considering quorum and other things that we might want to do with town meeting could be done in the context of looking overall at how you want the government to operate.
You think we should put that as a sub-unit of our master plan?
I think it's worth thinking about. On the other hand, you know, I realize that one is quite an ambitious task, and so if I have any empathy for Jan Cornel and the other people who are driving that, I'd want to discuss with them whether they want to have some scope creep or not.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know,
But
hiring consultants is just another consultant.
Well, no, well, on structure of town government, I think really needs to be more, I mean, it's, no one from the outside can really, I mean, you can get information and so forth, but really, it has to come out of looking at the overall, how the government is operating, and are there ways of not only making it more efficient, but adapting how the different boards and committees work, given the reality of what the community has become over the last 20, 30 years, the demographics, how much time people have and so forth.
Yeah, I guess I would feel that it's not a master planning committee thing.
No, just,
Yeah.
just throwing it out there, so it's-
You know, it doesn't need to happen this year or next year,
Right.
but.
It should happen.
It just, as I said, I think it's been, is it like 15 years, I think, since the last one, and, so going more than about 20 years feels longish to me.
especially with all the change we have.
Yes.
And that we're almost all built out.
Well, great. Well, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Wayne.
Thank you.
See you on the 30th.
That's right.
We better see you on the 30th.
3 weeks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Wayne. Thanks, Charlene.
Thanks.
All right, we're moving on to your report.
Oh,
Look at
okay.
that. Now you're gone, you get down to that, what is it, an iPad? Look at you. Moving away from the laptop.
Yeah. All right, Town Administrator's Report. Item 1, the Planning Board has asked if a member of this board would like to participate on the search committee for the new Assistant to Planner position, which they will be advertising shortly after town meeting, provided that the funding is approved
So,
at town meeting. So, there are 2 prior members of the planning board on this board, so maybe someone has some interest in that.
I'd be interested.
yeah, I have no problem. It's, but a question I have is, and I was actually talking to a member of the Personnel Board last weekend. When we're doing something like this, do we request a member of the Personnel Board to be also a part of the
Not,
search committee? I would recommend that we do.
not routinely, but it's not a bad
I mean,
idea.
they are our personnel experts. I think it would be good if they're available to,
Back out to Pete and see if they,
yeah, have,
Yeah, that's a good idea.
you know, and maybe at some point we might even want to say that that's a requirement.
First, we've got to get our personnel board to meet regularly.
Um,
Make that a
meeting
requirement.
right now.
It's just an incredibly important step in bringing somebody on board, you know. They go through the grading of it, but then they're not involved when we're actually hiring the person.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay.
So I guess I would propose that at some point we make that a requirement, that it has to go through the, you know, a personnel board member.
We
At
have to add
least,
that to
at
the
least
charge
they
then of
need
the
to be,
bylaw of the
at
personnel
least they
committee.
need to be asked.
If they, yeah, okay. And was,
Nathan, are you proposing to relook at the charge in the bylaw then of the personnel committee? Amending it then?
Well,
Eventually, we just.
maybe, but I think I was just suggesting that it's a process when, I assume that you're involved in every hiring.
yeah, I mean, it
that
could
goes
just be
on
a
here, that-
practice that we adopt.
Yeah.
It doesn't
That the
have to
personnel
be
board is always
bylaw.
invited to be a part.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, they're sometimes involved in bargaining sessions.
It wouldn't be for all hiring, however, would it?
Yeah, I'm just gonna ask, because I'm thinking about,
This wouldn't be for all hiring,
what about the Board of Health?
new police, or a full-time policeman, or,
Yeah.
you know, they're.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a good question.
I don't know. I mean, they're not at all involved in those roles, but in these roles, they're involved in the grading of it, the review of the job description.
Well, should we ask them if they'd be interested? And
Uh,
if they do have an interest then? Or did
Yeah.
you talk to somebody that said they would have an interest?
Yeah, that they saw the benefit in it.
Okay, they saw the benefit in it, okay. So,
So-
yeah,
But I'm only bringing it up because here's a near-term
Yeah.
search that's happening, and so it'd be great if we could just
Well,
ask Pete to reach out to the personnel board and say, hey, do you want to,
We'll be doing a facilities manager too,
and we'll
so.
be
yeah,
doing,
a
yeah.
facilities manager.
And
right,
both of those are jobs that they've reviewed.
Right, yeah.
What about the Board of Health then? Would that one come under that too? Would you consider that we would need? I mean, because,
Well,
is there a search committee for that one, or is it just
I
an
don't
ad
think-
in the paper? I mean, who's doing, how
I
do
don't
we?
think they're going, I haven't heard that they're moving forward with anything at the moment. I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's just filling their own
Yeah.
position. that-
Well, this is just
but I
filling
guess-
their own position too, so that's why
Yeah,
I'm asking the
but-
question.
But it's, yeah, I mean, there should probably be a,
Seems to me
like a
if we-
level.
So
know?
Tim,
I
if
mean,
you
are
could
gonna
just
have it
ask
for
the
every-
personnel board what they think
Yeah.
about them getting
Yeah.
more involved
Right.
in
And
the
then-
actual interviewing process. and
Yeah.
And
They know
we-
what the rules are,
Right,
you know, what you can and you can't ask, and
yeah.
And what level of job would that maybe require a search committee?
Right.
So that we're doing a better job of screening applicants.
Yeah, yeah, that's just it, because I don't think like an admin, you know, just a general admin would have a search committee, right?
Right.
It would
Yeah,
be-
probably wouldn't, yeah.
You know, maybe,
Making
yeah,
applications.
but personnel committee could set a, you know, grade 7 or higher sort of thing,
Well, I
grade
mean,
9 or higher.
there's
thing.
one other position that we just, instituted in us for, treasurer collector.
Yeah, right,
So-
Yeah, that's true, that's another recruitment
yeah.
we'll be doing.
We're having no money, we're hiring a lot.
Okay, so Kate, did you volunteer for
I
this?
volunteered for that.
For that, okay. Does the board wanna vote that recommendation?
Yeah,
to
does
the
somebody
planning
wanna
board?
make,
I move that Kate Reed be, what is the term?
representative?
Be the representative of the Board of Selectmen to the search committee for the assistant to the planner.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second,
Any further discussion? Oscar Lilo, aye?
Kissinger, aye.
Reed, aye?
Brown eye?
Von Roskin, aye.
All right. Okay, moving on, next item, you'll see an email in the packet from the chairman of the Bedford Board of Selectmen asking if Carlisle is still interested in the Hanscom Field Advisory Committee.
What is the Hanscom Field
Yeah,
Advisory
that's a good
Committee?
I honestly don't know, it hasn't come up since I've been here. They say that Steve Lerner was the
You know?
member of that,
Come on up.
You wanna be the
Let us know.
representative?
was that a?
Let us know what, I mean, what do you think it is?
I think it's anything to do with Hanscom and
Yeah.
development of
Commercial.
voice and anything that's going on in Hanscom Air Force Base.
At the Air Force Base specifically?
I would say it's probably an important committee for us to have a finger on the pulse, because it does have pretty direct consequences to us in terms of,
Does anyone know who
Traffic.
Steve Lerner is?
Are you volunteering?
Or was, or?
The name
I've heard
sounds
of him.
familiar, but I can't.
I'll
don't know.
volunteer,
Oh, good,
Kate?
yeah.
yeah. How often, I mean, they probably don't meet that often, but,
I could find out
Haley?
yeah, we,
something from Mr. Rosen.
I
It's just 4 hours a
provisionally-
day.
I provisionally volunteer to find out what the heck it's
Yeah.
all about.
yeah.
Okay.
After town meeting.
Yeah, and who, I mean, is this a Bedford committee? I'm asking somebody who doesn't know.
I don't know. Yeah, I suspect it was a regional committee.
Probably.
Because he's the
regional.
Bedford Selectman and the HFAC Chair.
Yeah, so there's
Chair of this
probably, I'm
committee,
sure
but-
Lincoln would be involved, and Lexington, right?
Yeah.
Most of it's in Bedford, right, the base?
Yeah, Concord.
No, there's a
Oh,
piece,
there he goes.
Commercial activities at Hanscom Field.
Yeah.
Mm,
yeah, there's a whole civilian side
All
of the
kinds
airport.
civilian stuff.
yeah,
And some of that's in Lincoln.
all right.
Yeah, there's housing
All right.
there and.
So do you
all
wa-
kinds
Do you want to be appointed, or do you want to wait until you find out what,
Let's find out more.
yeah?
Let's find out more.
Okay,
But you
Great.
can make me the point
yeah,
person, so Tim, if you find out anything, would you let me
I'll
know,
reach out.
please?
Reach out to him.
If there's a meeting, I'll try to show up.
Okay. All right, the next item, we have a request from the Carlisle Garden Club to use the town common on Saturday, May 19th, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. for their annual plant sale. We have a motion for the board's,
Yeah, I move that the board approve the Carlisle Garden Club's request to use the town common for their annual plant sale on Saturday, May 19th, 2018, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Can I just, before with somebody, oh, I guess somebody can second it, then I have a question.
okay, you want to
Second.
Okay.
Uh,
Further discussion?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
I don't
Yes,
see it
they
here,
might
but I
want it.
just want to make sure that we're not creating a conflict about any banner. This is just to
Yeah,
use
they
the,
don't put banners up,
it didn't, I don't believe they asked for,
okay.
yeah.
asked for a banner. We think we had that banner worked out between Heat Smart and Old Home.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the garden club never
I don't
used a
think we
banner.
could
They have,
fit
they
another-
have these flags that they put out now, but they won't do that. That's
Okay.
something they used last year.
All right.
Right.
I'm gonna jump to number 5 and
We
then
haven't,
finish up.
yeah,
Oh,
we haven't, Oskalillo, aye?
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Reed, aye.
Brown eye.
Von Roskin, aye.
All right, now you may proceed.
Okay, gonna move to number 5 and then finish up. We'll
Yeah,
come back
that
and
makes sense.
finish with 4, actually. The Traffic Safety Advisory Committee would like to come in on April 24th to present a request for a stop sign on East Street outbound at Rutland Street. And the committee wanted to make this request in advance in case other residents want to show up and offer input.
I noticed they have a speed sign out there now. I mean, with the, the radar speed
Mhm.
sign, because there is a 25-mile-an-hour limit there, just as you hit East Riding. In fact, when people are looking for East Riding, I tell them it's right behind the 25-mile-an-hour.
Oh, so this is going up the hill,
It's going up the hill. That's
where
right.
there isn't a stop
Because right
sign.
now, there's
Yeah.
two
Right.
stop
Why else would they
signs,
want to
but
put
the
a stop
third
sign
one-
there if there is one?
No, but I was
So
thinking,
there'd be
was
two.
there, I was thinking, was there a yield sign the other way, but?
No.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
stop signs in the other two directions.
Yeah, but why would you stop people? It's so the people coming
Frankly-
inbound don't have to stop?
Frankly, I think that's going to cause more
Yep.
problems than it solves.
I agree.
Because people now know
Yeah.
that they can go through. But if you get 3 cars waiting there, and, the one on the right is supposed to have the right, or the first one there, and
Yeah.
it's going to, it's not like a 4-way stop, and it's at an angle.
Right, yeah, no, the inbound people won't
The
stop.
thing that'll
So-
help
so-
is people on foot trying, because there is that nice bike pedestrian lane, and then it dies right there, and then there's no place to walk, and those cars are going fast around there. This- That speed sign is now showing they're going around 40 miles
Oh,
an
yeah,
hour,
people
not
fly.
25.
No, it's-
And there's no place to jump out of the way, so maybe that's an effort to slow them down to the 25, I don't know.
I think what we'll do is we'll hear on April 24th.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and speaking of TSAC.
Yep.
That's an awful.
Yeah.
Acronym. The traffic study, Safe Streets, what is it called?
Oh, yeah.
I think we got so many of those.
Complete Streets.
Yeah, so is that proceeding? Like how, where?
Yeah, we had a kickoff meeting of sorts with TEC, the consultant,
Yep.
and the working group that we put together for the project. Pete Gambino was on there representing planning board, master plan. His wife Melinda's representing Pathways, Deb Belanger with TSAC, and Jan Cornell representing the master plan steering committee.
Oh, good, okay.
So we kind of went through the proposed schedule and some other information. We're still waiting for a notice to proceed from the state, so we can't officially move forward with the study yet. But we're doing a lot of data gathering, and we, talked with them about that and the kinds of reports and studies that we can put our hands on now to get to them.
Good.
To give them some background before they get going in earnest. So that's more or less underway. We're just waiting for the official go-ahead from the state.
Perfect.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good.
All right. Back to number 4.
Item number 4, you will recall that the board asked me to put together a working group to look at housing support services for the Housing Authority in the wake of the retirement of the housing coordinator and discussion of some options in that area. So we did, a number of the members of that working group are here tonight. We met on 5 or 6 occasions. We looked at the legal responsibility of housing authorities, information provided to us by the housing authority, and a lot of it didn't particularly pertain to a town of our size with a very small housing board and no housing units that we own or operate. But it was a fairly meticulous process. I think we certainly gave everything due consideration. The memo that you have before you kind of outlines the main areas that we'd propose to offer support for the Housing Authority in terms of administrative resources, making available time in the town administrator's office between Jen and myself, and doing various administrative tasks for the Housing Authority, answering correspondence, phone calls, walk-in traffic, if you will, certainly producing meeting notices and minutes and that sort of more mundane support. In the area of legal services, town council has confirmed that under the retainer agreement, they can handle any kind of compliance in a legal sense that's required with the DHCD. Also, the town's legal requirements under the ground leases for both the Benfield and Till properties. Town council spent a fair amount of time going through those leases and really kind of distilled it down to a number of, or I would say more or less a handful of legal requirements, and not, you know, dozens and dozens of legal requirements that require sort of constant vigilance. So there are things that can be done on a cyclical basis, and, you know, a few times a year to quarterly activities, that kind of thing. We did spend a lot of time looking at various alternatives, the regional housing services, the consortium in Concord, and there's another one based out of Hudson that's very similar. We think could provide, you know, housing planning services, project support services as needed going forward. In the operating budget, there's an allowance to join a regional organization of that sort during the year. And between, you know, I think that those are the major recommendations. You know, I think we all acknowledge that, you know, based upon the process, basically you had, you know, Mark and Steve sort of checking out midway through saying we're going to town meeting and, you know, we really don't care, you know, to participate any further. We think that some kind of mediation or facilitation is probably a next step. I think they agreed, and everyone agreed to kind of wait until after town meeting to go at that in earnest. So I think that's where we are with that. Clearly, they made up their mind that, you know, they had an approach to this issue. They do think they still need a housing coordinator at a certain number of hours to fulfill their mission. I think, you know, most of us felt differently, you know, looking at the actual requirements and the amount of effort, and that we felt that, you know, we could marshal those resources and you know, fulfill the legal obligation to the Housing Authority, which, you know, is, I think I point out in the menu, in the memo rather, we couldn't find a single other community that funds its housing authority through its operating budget. It's just not done. Well, frankly, most housing authorities own, operate, or manage the actual housing units, and we don't. So normally that's where a housing authority would get some rental income. They get subsidy from the state. That's where most housing authorities are funded from. So we're a little bit of an anomaly in that sense. So I think that partly that's reason for, you know, some of the tension, the friction, if you will. There's also a chart attached to the memo that I have to thank David for kind of painstakingly creating this based upon the analysis, the documents that the Housing Authority provided, and our interactions with town council and with others. And if the board's had an opportunity to review that, I hope you have. If you haven't, if you want to ask questions about that, I'm sure we could answer those. I think, you know, at the end of the day, I think, you know, the board ought to take a formal position in that we've made recommendations through the budget itself on how to, that we're basically using some of the housing coordinator funds to fund a facilities manager, to fund housing services. You know, we have an approach that I think we've, got a kind of, a formal vote sort of backing all of that up, I think is necessary at this point to support the actions that we've taken through the budget process.
Yeah, so, I mean, earlier I had asked Wayne about a PowerPoint presentation or a statement. You know, and he said, I guess he seemed to think a statement might be more appropriate. You know, so.
Well, I certainly wouldn't put this chart.
No, right. No, exactly, but I mean, overall, you know, to put together a statement that we want to vote on. You know, do we want to?
Yeah, so I think there's several things I think that we'd like to get done tonight.
Yeah.
One is, you know, the Board of Selectmen should, you know, hopefully vote to accept the recommendations from the working group. And, you know, meaning accepting both of these things and, you know, understanding them and agreeing that this is the path that we should go down. And then the other thing I'd like us to talk about is, you know, how do we get our statement out about this? And, but I think that we should start with this.
You were on the
Come on
working
up,
group.
David.
Yeah, David was on the working group.
Yeah.
Tim, have any of the calls been already deflected to COA, and how, if so, how are they coping with it?
There hasn't been a single call since November.
No, that, not a word of a lie there. The phone has not rung. We get occasional correspondence that we answer directly, but we have no walk-ins, no phone calls since November, December timeframe.
Can I ask, the 351 municipalities in Massachusetts, so not one, as you pointed out, except us, does operating budget funding of the Housing Authority.
That's my understanding. I
Yeah,
haven't been able to
no,
find one.
I believe that, but what I'm wondering is there are a lot of small towns in Massachusetts that I can't imagine that they would have affordable housing. Is it perhaps the case that some don't even have a housing authority, or?
There may be,
Or
there may
does-
be some that don't. I think the number is 10 as to the number of communities with housing authorities that have no housing units. I don't, there are none,
But there
none
mi-
other
and
around
there
here.
might
but-
be some that don't actually even have, that don't have housing units or a housing authority.
Yeah, no, that's true too. I don't know that number. but,
Okay.
Yeah.
Probably more
A
than 10.
handful that don't have units.
I just point of clarification, I think Tim didn't mention in the recommendation the 2 hours of council on aging. You're all aware of it.
I was asking
Aware of
that.
it, but Tim
Right.
neglected to
And so-
mention that, so I think it's important
Right.
for anybody who's watching to lay that out.
Right, but I also just want to clarify that the Council on Aging had already come to us requesting 6 hours of additional time. And they said that they would not need an incremental 2 hours in order to be able to answer the calls. So they're absorbing it in the 6 hours they were already going to ask for.
Okay.
That was,
Yeah,
my
so
next
there is
question,
an
because I
additional
was at
two.
the FinCom meeting when they weren't, it wasn't clear whether the 6 hours was 6 plus 2 or 6 including
Yeah,
2 or
they've
where-
confirmed that it's
Yeah.
6 hours,
Yeah.
it's their original 6-hour ask before
Okay.
that whole housing coordinator thing
So
came
we are
up.
not going to do the 2 hours.
So we're not actually providing any funding specifically for this, but
Okay.
it just so happens funding we're providing helps with this.
And they're agreeable to get any training if need be.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, just from a technical standpoint, as I understand it from the open meeting law discussion that town council had, is that the selectmen didn't ask Tim to form a working group. The selectmen asked Tim for a recommendation. Tim independently decided to form a working group. That's sort of the way that it's
No,
not
that's
something that the
accurate, yeah.
selectmen have formed.
No, that is how it
So that
evolved.
Tim formed, and so that working group made its recommendation to Tim, and so it's really just Tim's recommendation that you are accepting. Since the working group
Okay, I
isn't
said the
reporting
working
to
group.
you,
Yeah,
the working group's
yeah.
reporting to Tim,
That's
because
a
he
good point.
formed it.
Which is why he did the whole intro.
Exactly.
Right.
And put together the.
why
I just think it's important to remind ourselves of that going forward
Yeah,
as
that's
well
a
when
good
these
point.
things,
Important
when these
mechanism
things are
that
set
we
up.
need to learn how to use.
Yeah.
And we want to use it correctly.
Right.
in terms of, just for what it's worth, in terms of town meeting, my recommendation would be that the selectmen have a statement. Well, first, I assume that what Wayne would do is he would ask any boards and committees that have a position on an amendment, in this instance, because the amendment will be known in advance. And so the selectmen would state their position, and if the trust can meet, the trust would state its position. I think it might be appropriate for FinCom to state a position on it, not so much on the merits, but more on the process. As Wayne pointed out, you know, it's basically, there's a tacit assumption that we don't do this. It's sort of like a nuclear option, and I think the FinCom may have an interest in saying something about that, but not to do any visuals, to just, you know, have it be statements. The only other question is whether to have something in the newspaper prior to town meeting. You know, a statement from the selectmen, sort of similar to whatever you might say at town meeting, but sort of in a concise 300-word letter to the editor, or whatever is worked out with the mosquito.
Right, so I guess there's at least one, potentially two things that we would need to write, and I would be happy to write them and present them to the Board of Selectmen. If there's gonna be something in the newspaper, we would need to talk to Betsy, because we're gonna miss the Tuesday deadline, and see if she would hold a letter to the editor slot for us, if we decide we wanna do that. Because we would all want to review whatever it was that I was writing, I presume. And so the 24th is the earliest that we would be able to get it. And then that would get it in the Friday of the mosquito before town meeting, which is really, I think, good timing. And then there's the statement that I think we should also review on the 24th. Well, one might be a little longer, because you only have 300 words for the letter. Right. I mean, if everybody here agrees, you know, first of all, do we want to do something in the newspaper? I assume I think we have to do a statement. So I guess the first question is, do we want to try to do something in the newspaper that's a statement about our position on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense to get it out there, set the stage.
Yeah, I think it's important to, otherwise, we don't want to make it sound like, okay, there was a housing coordinator and now there's not. Right, and the only difference is minus the housing coordinator, because there are changes that are, as Tim has outlined in detail. So I think a shorter version of Tim's memo, basically, right, saying, okay, we're changing the way we do this sort of administrative kind of work, right? It's a multifaceted approach. And as Nathan pointed out, you know, adding 2 hours to the COA, that's going to be, you know.
We're actually not, because.
Yeah, so I don't know, we have to be careful how we word that, I suppose, right? Or whether maybe we don't bring it up at all.
I guess I would propose that I can write something up and bring it in. We can if there's major edits, let's just do it right there, because we have to get it out. We have to get it out,
Carrie
that night.
actually lifted a whole section out of our minutes for the last essay, which I think dealt somewhat with this topic as well. So,
yes, from the trust perspective, and I think,
yes, but I mean,
I do think that the trust needs to meet before town meeting and take a position on this, and perhaps craft a statement as well. I just think it's really important, because the housing coordinator also supports the trust, and so I think the trust should have a statement.
Well, the trust will not have a unanimous position on this, just so you know.
Yep, that's understood.
Where are we on planning a mediated session? Because it would really be lovely if we could also at the end say, and we are going to be meeting on such a date, I mean, I really like.
I think that
Do we have?
I haven't scheduled anyone. I've talked to 3 or 4 different
I thought that.
vendors. I figured we were waiting until town meeting
I
was.
thought we were told to wait until after town meeting.
That was what the other
I think
guys said, yeah.
that's it.
Well, to wait to even schedule it?
Yes,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, they wanted to wait.
Yeah.
Is there a
Housing
housing trust
authorities-
meeting
housing authorities'
between now and
reaction
town
to
meeting?
the vote could have an impact on how you go forward.
Got it, okay, all right. So it's not like we haven't been working on it.
Because
No.
if this goes forward, then there's gonna be less desire or need on their part to work collaboratively.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
If this goes forward, everything breaks.
Yeah,
But
I
we
think-
spend a lot of money.
yeah, I still,
Well, you can certainly announce that
Not that I don't think
that there's an agreement to go to mediation, and I think that should be stated.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, and not that I don't think you will, but I just think we have to be really careful in our statement
Mhm.
to use as neutral language as possible. I have a memo about this that I wrote to Luke, who might, I don't know, want to pass it to you. Use no adjective, as few adjectives as possible. That's my recommendation to you.
Yeah, no, I mean, it should get the
Yeah.
point across and not be biased in any way. I mean, that's,
Factual information.
Yeah, exactly.
We did this, not we
Right.
wisely did this. We did it. You can,
yeah,
you can,
right.
you know, argue whether it was wise or not, but you can't argue whether it got done or not.
Mhm.
And that's
Right.
what I would like for us to be as careful as possible in our language, that we are not being provocative, we're being factual.
I completely agree with you.
Thank you.
Although part of it is explaining why you did it.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Again,
but-
in a
but
straightforward
again,
manner.
In a
But, yeah.
straightforward manner.
I mean, one other thing is that, based on the letters that the essay and the letters that the Housing Authority has put into their, into the mosquito, it might make sense to at least have a discussion of, if they make some of those same points in their presentation, if it seems appropriate based on comments, other comments from the public, for the selectmen to comment on any of those, you might want to sort of prepare something in case, just so it's not somebody winging at that point, such that you're sure that it's, done in a unemotional way. But, for example, the statement that, the Housing Trust has done nothing for the last 4 years is one that, if, that gets picked up and seems to have some resonance for people, there are answers to that, may be worth, that the public would not be aware of, that may or may not be useful, but just to think about it is all.
I think we need to read back through what's in the mosquito and understand what the arguments are. Just paraphrasing what you said, and have answers for those arguments.
Yeah.
And,
If need be, yeah.
and if it seems appropriate, we don't want to get into an open fight
No.
at town meeting.
No, I mean, that's.
But if there's a clarifying point that we can make, we should make that point. And the more people who do it, the better.
Right.
So what Tim's memo is saying is, David went through every single thing that they gave us that they were required to do, and we found a home for it. Or we decided that it didn't need to be done because there was no actual requirement that we do it.
Or in some cases, town council actually said it was inappropriate for it to have been done.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's what this was. This is from the job description, this is from the memos, this is from all the stuff that we got multiple times from them as to what it was. And oftentimes just, well, it's in the job description, so it has to be here.
Yeah.
A job description doesn't mean the work is done.
Right.
And then a home was found for I'm just going quickly back through, a home was found for all the administrative tasks. Legal tasks is by Tim and Jen. Legal is gonna be done by town council. Planning and project support would be done possibly by the RHSO, or by if it's something that we all agree on, and there's a plan for it, the trust can fund consulting funds for it. And that it just doesn't make any sense for us to, we're kind of at a unique point here where we have a position that doesn't have anybody in it. And we don't really have that much for them to do right now. What we need to do is get on the same page and develop a plan.
Yep.
And so we need to go through the mediation. It's gonna take us a while to do that. And let's not fund this position. Let's focus on getting our ducks in a row and go from there.
And speaking of which, I think with regard to the RHSO, again, not entirely in response to what the Housing Authority may say, but I think it is important to make it clear that the budget is just providing the funds for it if and when the trust and/or the Housing Authority, not and/or, if the Housing Authority and/or the trust, because it's the trust's decision essentially, decides to pursue that, the funding is before the next town meeting, that the funding's there to do it, but that there's no immediate plan to do that because of everything you just said. You need to do mediation and get on the same page and do all that stuff, because it doesn't make sense to commit to the hours with a regional consortium, because it's not something where it's just pay as you go. You are committing to a chunk of money. You don't want to necessarily do that unless and until you get to a certain place. And I think that may be an important point to make, because one of their comments may be, because it's things they've said back when they came to meetings, was, well, we haven't even talked to those people yet, although they did talk to them in an effort to undermine the process. But, they aren't clear that it will meet the needs, and will say, well, we're not committing to any particular one yet. We're just putting the money in the budget and if we get to that point. And I think it's important to make that clear, so it's not like, why are you spending money on this if we're not in agreement about it? It says we won't until we're in agreement about it is the answer to that, and just to be,
And we have it in case we need to.
Right, and since it's in the budget, there may be this presumption that, you're not hiring a housing coordinator and you're automatically joining this consortium, which is not the case.
Right.
And for the same fiscally responsible reasons, that why spend money when you don't know what you're doing?
Right. Okay, so is there?
This time, you talked them out of, there was the same conversation over the cutting hours. They were gonna go to the floor, have the fight on the floor.
Well, it was partly too, because, the process had started a little later. I mean, Nathan and Tim both put a lot of effort into it, but, the board really hadn't seen it, couldn't get on the same page. And, when you want to make sure it's thoroughly vetted and it's done right, and, this time they went through the process, and I think
And it's actually good, because given the disjunction between the two groups, if the town had joined that consortium a year ago,
We'd be wasting money.
We'd be throwing money.
And it's also good that the board, it's not really good, but it is just a perfect opportunity right now. You're not often given the opportunity to rethink a position when there's nobody in it.
Yeah, no.
It's just, it's a perfect opportunity to not take action and to see what happens and get everybody working better together.
and when you make a decision, to have it be one that's, is fiscally responsible.
Right.
Which is the key.
So,
Do we have to?
This is not, this may be just a side thing, but some towns may not have housing authorities, we were saying. But, how does that, how does that happen? Were they dissolved? Were they never formed?
They were never formed. You have to, the statute establishes the process to establish one, but you don't have to. It's like an awful lot of things in the statutes.
So,
just wondering why we did form one, since we don't have any housing.
Yeah, well, we formed it actually a lot earlier than we did the trust, too.
Right, yeah, the authority was before the trust.
Yes, so I'm
And-
just,
Yeah, no, it's
I
a
just-
good point, yeah, yeah. So do we
Sorry.
wanna make a motion for you to draft it, or do we need to make a motion for?
Well,
No.
first I want
First we
to
have
make a
to-
motion that,
Oh, to
that
accept
the
it.
Board of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Selectmen
Sorry.
accept, the memorandum regarding the housing support services recommendation, his housing support services recommendations, that is dated April 6, 2018, and the attached table,
From the working group.
yeah, from the working group.
second,
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Oscar Lilo, aye.
Kissinger, aye.
read I.
Brown eye?
Von Roskin, aye.
Thanks. So, we probably don't need a motion to have you draft something,
No,
and then,
which is a point.
yeah. Exactly.
To make a motion, I'll
You're
have
it.
to do it.
Yeah, oh, yeah, no, you'll do it, you'll do it.
All right, so what am I
so thank
drafting?
you.
Am I
Well,
drafting
I
something
think-
for the mosquito and asking Betsy to hold a spot for us, if possible? I'm not gonna assume that she can.
I think both.
If she
Both,
can't,
yeah.
then I'm not gonna draft one.
Right,
Oh,
yeah.
that's true. Well, you're
Right.
gonna draft the statement for the town meeting.
I'm gonna draft a statement for the town meeting,
Out of
and I would
which
draft
we
something for,
Theoretically, we could.
condense.
Condense for the thing. So-
but I will draft them both so that we can
Yes.
approve them both on the same night,
On the 24th.
on the 24th. I guess we don't have to approve the statement
No.
until before the Board of Selectmen, so if
Yeah,
there's
but
major
it's-
problems, we could push that off, but if there's major problems on that, there's going to be major
Right.
problems in what's going in the mosquito.
Right.
And then the other thing, since Gary's here and Bill's here, was to try to see if the trust can have a meeting prior to the 30th.
Right.
To take a position on this, and perhaps have a short statement as well.
What about the night of town meeting? I mean, if worst comes to worst.
Yeah, we could always do it then.
But that's kind of, because
Carrie's
we have a
not
Board of
here until the
Selectmen meeting
30th.
that night, and,
Yeah, well,
Yeah, we should set it up beforehand.
yeah, Carrie, are you back the week before the 30th?
You're like,
We're back on the 29th.
I was gonna
see,
say he's
that's
back the
the
day
problem.
before, yeah.
He's back the day before.
Yeah, but Bill can run it.
Bill, can you-
call in.
Can you set up a meeting?
Okay.
Mm.
I think, like,
You can call in.
Yeah.
Gary can call in if we catch him before he starts traveling.
Yeah.
Yeah, 29.
and so,
Well, you
so
can FaceTime.
it wouldn't be on the 29th, I think we're talking about, like,
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
either next week or the following week.
Well,
Right.
next week I'm in California.
nice. Well, you can
I
Skype.
have to get
No,
ready.
the
The
That's
trust
fine.
meet before the selectmen's meeting on the 24th, as you used
Yeah, I
to.
would think so. I mean, it shouldn't be a very long meeting.
Yeah, I mean,
At
I don't see
6:30?
why, I don't see why we couldn't do it.
Oh, you're saying that on the 24th?
On the 24th.
Oh, yeah, yeah, we could always do
That's
that.
the, that's what the trust used to do, is you'd meet
Yeah.
before the selectmen's
Yeah,
meeting.
that's true, yeah. Yeah, because Bill will be here anyway, he likes coming to these, and
Meet
Gary
on
will
the,
call in.
do it on the 24th at 6:30.
Yeah.
Did Jen send an email out then to all the trust members?
Yeah. Doodle?
Inviting them?
No,
Oh, no, it
just
doesn't
not
have
a
to be a
doodle,
doodle. Yeah,
just
just-
send an email, because the only person we now need to check with is
Steve?
Steve.
That's, and we're talking the 24th, right?
Yes.
Right,
yeah.
the 24th at 6:30.
But what if Steve can't make it? We still have a quorum, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But, and then if we all vote and it's unanimous,
Steve's headed to Korea for a couple of weeks, I think. We better
Oh, right.
check his schedule.
Yeah, I mean, we could always, if anybody
not gonna
asks,
be a
we
town
could
meeting.
caveat and say, it was
unanimous, but
It was 6-0, right, and one person wasn't at the meeting.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you just, yeah.
It'll be 6:30.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and maybe if we could, get that email, that'd be good, because then I
What
can put it
email?
on my calendar. That it's
Oh.
on the 24th, because I will forget. Yeah.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, thanks for all your
Yeah.
help with
Thank
this,
you.
David, it's been great. Going home to make dinner? 10 o'clock. Did you? Oh, good, yeah. Well, Kimball's is open, grab some ice cream.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yep, stop.
this late, you think?
Oh, no, it's not. No, it's just open for the season. So we didn't talk about the meeting schedule. Sorry, I kind of skipped back. April 23rd is the FinCom hearing, 24th is our meeting. and then the trust, and then April 30th will be
Are we supposed to go
meeting.
to the FinCom one on the 23rd?
I don't think so. Do they want us there? Did they request that we be there? No.
No, it's their public hearing on the budget, so it's
Okay.
more for the public, but.
And May 8th is the annual town election. Boy, you got less than a month, Claude. Wow, lucky guy. Lucky guy. I'm gonna write you in just out of spite, yeah. Liaison reports. Anybody have any liaison reports? Oh, you do? Oh.
Well, yeah, so, of sorts. So, I attended a Trails Committee meeting about a month ago during the nor'easter.
Mhm.
And then, and I talked to you about that, but then there was another one subsequent to that, and I just talked with Christine Lear, who's present. And there's a neighborhood, Oak and Knoll neighborhood, where, a dead end, where there's a few neighbors that want to create an easement on one of their properties to connect to the Manus land. And surprisingly, well, perhaps not surprisingly, a lot of neighbors in that neighborhood are opposed to it. Apparently the majority. And in a very adamant way. And they came to the Trails Committee meeting because this one resident who wants to create the easement, you know, quote, for the neighborhood, wants the Trails Committee to sort of also bring a trail to kind of meet up with their easement. And the neighborhood's very opposed, and the Trails Committee actually, it turned out to be quite vitriolic, or I don't know, you know. So the reason I bring this up is that I had mentioned, you know, is it possible to create an easement that's only for the benefit of Carlisle residents and their guests? And I don't know if you remember that. And I asked you whether I could talk to town council, and they came back and said, yes, it is, but, you know, enforcing such a thing is not easy. But there's no legal impediment to having that. So I tried to indicate, you know, there might be ways to, well, certainly this neighbor could create the easement just for the few neighbors that want it, and say it's, you know, or informally say that they can use it, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, it's just interesting that,
Anyway, they just give them permission to.
Right, I don't know.
yeah, well, yeah, but the neighborhood is, I think the neighborhood's more upset that the Trails Committee wants to make some trails on the Manus land.
Oh.
Because then people from the Manus land, you know, who are coming in from Rutland Road could potentially.
How dare those other Carlilians invade their
So,
space?
but I'm just saying that, you know, in spite of my effort to sort of promote the notion of trails, I just want to make you aware that there is, you know, at least in some cases, substantial pushback in some neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So it's not an easy thing.
Right.
It's not a universally held, you know, I have gotten support. People, based on my letter, you know, contacted me and said, oh, it's a great idea. But I think one may find that there's a larger constituency that is kind of adverse to it. So that's my little report.
Thanks for following up on that. Nathan?
I don't have anything that I haven't already said.
Yeah, I don't have anything. I think one thing that we should bring up is that we're negotiating, we've started the negotiation of Tim's
Yeah, Tim's and
contract,
Chief Fisher's.
and Chief Fisher's contract, and the school one is ongoing. So I think we should, you know, once we get a little more settled, probably just after town meeting, we should set up an executive session to discuss those three.
Right, and,
Yeah.
and the priority order is Tim's and then Chief Fisher's,
Right.
because
Yeah.
Tim's is this year, Chief Fisher's is next year.
Right, yep, yeah, so, but those are just in progress. I don't think I've got anything else to report, so.
I have nothing.
Good. Carrie, have you been to any meetings? Good.
Nothing here, thank you.
All right, okay, so now the minutes that,
That's why it's funny when you don't know reading.
So, are these the minutes that I,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, there's the set that you critiqued.
So just to let everybody know that the section that I edited was just the section on
The housing.
the housing.
Yep.
And
Carlisle Housing Authority?
Yeah. That's the section, and I can pull it up in red line if anybody wants to see it.
Yeah, so, other than those changes, does anybody have any comments? I mean, I think, yeah, we've gone through these a couple of times, right? So,
I think
it's a big old set of
I think
minutes.
there was one typo that I gave Jen a long time ago, which I'm sure she's got.
Mhm.
And I don't think there was anything substantive.
All right.
Move
Somebody wanna make
approval of the minutes of Tuesday, February 27th, 2018 as submitted.
Second.
Oscar Lilo, aye. Is he
He's
moving?
frozen.
He's frozen.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, there he's back. I think that's an
I
aye.
think that was an aye from Clary.
Can you hear me now?
Now we
Yep.
can. Was that an aye?
Yes.
Rita?
Brown eye?
Aye, aye, aye.
Von Roskin, aye.
All right. Okay, now March 27th.
I move the Board of Selectmen approve the minutes of Tuesday, March 27th, 2018, as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Oscar Lilo, aye.
Singer, aye.
Rita, aye?
Brown eye?
Claude's not participating.
Are you gonna
Oh,
vote?
Von Roskin,
All
aye.
right. Okay, we have reached 10, oh my gosh, 10:15.
I move the Board of Selectmen adjourn.
Second.
Oscar Lilo, aye.
Singer, aye.
Rita, aye?
Brown eye?
Von Roskin, aye.
Yeah, you see you.
Now we
Hey,
stop
Bill,
streaming.
how do you feel? You're gonna vote?